I want to welcome you to the Retro Rogues live show. Please pay attention to our warning graphic. It says that the Retro Rogues live show is intended for an adult audience and not intended for children under the age of 13. Parental discretion is advised. Again, I want to welcome you here to the show. My name is Dave Beatty, and I'm one of your hosts. For nearly the last 30 years, I've been a professional illustrator and graphic designer, worked on a lot of fun things that some people have heard of, such things as Batman Incorporated, Justice League of America, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I'm not going to get into tonight. But I'm very, very proud of my creator-owned series I'm currently working on called Red Skirts. And we'll be talking a little bit about Red Skirts, sort of in a manner, here just shortly when I talk about something else I've been working on. I want to welcome back my co-host. This is Mr. Eric Alexander. Eric, please tell the folks hopefully watching or listening at home some of the fun things that you have worked on as a creative professional.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I am Eric Alexander, also known as Bass God 14. That's Bass God 14, not Bass God 14. Bass God like a bass guitar. And I am the co-host of Retro Rogues Live. I'm also the associate producer for the feature film Occupants, which features Star Trek Voyager actor Robert Picardo and is currently streaming for free on Tubi. And I am also the co-producer and co-director of a new short film called Connection Established, which I hope to talk to you guys a lot more in upcoming episode. We just actually finished that project this week.
Very cool. Very cool. So do we want to start with talking about the premiere thing first, or we want to talk about this other thing first? Because they're both kind of like off the top type items.
Yeah, they actually I'll talk about routine in the pop culture segment. We'll do that.
Oh, okay.
And then so let's just go with our news for the top of the hour.
Okay. All right. So some of you may be aware, hopefully those of you that are watching, and then some of you may not. I've been talking about cryptically about this thing that I've been working on kind of secretly, not really divulging a lot about what's going on. Eric is aware of what's been going on, but and then a few other people have, but it's not been like a big announcement up until a couple days ago. I did announce it on my actual Facebook page. But I have started a small T-shirt printing company, essentially. That's what I've been working on. If I look exhausted, that's why I look exhausted. But one of the things that we're going to be offering is actually specifically for people to be able to visit the website. The name of the company is actually KirbyT. And then hopefully we're going to show the website here in just a few minutes. But one of the things we're going to be offering is T-shirts for a lot of the different projects. Like, for example, I was just talking about Red Skirts. I thought I would show this one off here on the show. I've got some shirts to show off here real quick. These shirts are actually quite big because some of these shirts are actually for me. So this is a shirt here. This is actually for Red Skirts. And then you can see right here, it's got the command emblem on it. And it's a green shirt because it's kind of like if you're familiar with Star Trek, you know, Captain Kirk had the green shirt. And then on the back of it, it has one of the catchphrases from Red Skirts. It says, Flark it. It's got the logo there as well.
That's very cool, Dave. That looks awesome.
So that's one of the shirts right there. And I'm going to throw it up from my shoulder. And now I'm going to show off a couple of the Retro Rogue shirts. And then we'll talk about the website here just real briefly. So let's get this one out here. This is one of the Retro Rogues shirts. If I can actually hold it up actually square to the camera. Retro Rogues Live. It's got the logo really big there. And then on the back, it's got a cool double R skull tag print right there for the back of the shirt. And then this one, I haven't changed the preview graphic actually on the website for this one yet, but hopefully I'll be doing it soon. But this is the Distressed Retro Rogues
very cool
shirt. And you can see compared to me, I am a big guy. You see how big this print is? If I can get it squared up. This is a well, hold on. I should have practiced this before. But anyhow, you can see this is a very large print. I think it's really cool. And then on the back, it's got a Retro Rogues tag, but it's actually the words Retro Rogues Live. So these are all available actually right now if you're curious to get one. Eric, if you wouldn't mind sharing my screen here real quick. So this is the KirbyT's website. This is the name of the company. Kirby, for some people who know, was my dog who passed away actually just a little while ago. And I'd been planning to do this for quite some time to actually launch this company. And I had been discussing names with some friends and whatever. And my friend, the Janimal, Jan, who actually was the co-host for the Retrospective show back in the day, Jan actually said, well, you should name it KirbyT's after Kirby. And I was like, well, that's a great idea. So I did name the company KirbyT's. Now here, just briefly, there's a lot of options here to start off with. For those of you that are fans of the Retro Rogues, we've got the black shirt that I just showed you with the skull on the back. I need to update the image for this one here. This is actually going to be the Distressed Retro Rogues logo shirt, and it's going to reflect that once I change it. We've also got it here on white if you want to get it in white. For those of you that are fans, hopefully, of red skirts, we've got red skirts here. This has got a tag print on the back of the security emblem. Front of the shirt shows off the main characters. We got dark meat, bushy tails. We got a KirbyT's. We got a lot of fun stuff here for people to check out. This is a way, if you buy a Retro Rogue shirt, this is a way that you can directly support what we are doing here with the Retro Rogues. The shirts and everything are priced to try and make them high quality, but still have them be at a price point that by the time that you pay shipping, because you pay actual shipping, there's a small handling charge, but it's not that high. The whole goal of this was to be able to, offer these shirts so that people could buy them and support the show, but actually get one without it costing like an arm and a leg. Because a lot of the different services that are available online, they're very nice and everything, but by the time you buy a shirt, you're paying $30 or $40 by the time you pay shipping, especially if you're a big guy like me and you have to get like a 2 or a 3X, and the prices go really, really high. So we're going to go back. So there's an actual just Retro Rogues page here that just has, and we're going to be adding to these designs. But for example, the white shirt here, this is $15.95 for a white shirt. The larger size is a little bit more, but the whole goal is to keep it where hopefully, if you want to support the show for $20, you can have a nice shirt, and that helps us support what we're doing here. So just wanted to show this off just here briefly here. And then for those of you that are really interested, if you need to do or want to do some custom t-shirts, there is a custom t-shirt option here because we will print shirts for you. So if that's something that you want to do, obviously check that out. There's no minimum orders on shirts, so if you just want to get one shirt, you can just get one shirt. I am personally supervising and overseeing everything that happens here at KirbyT's. So you can guarantee that, or you can take my word for it, that I'm being very, very specific and making sure the quality is really high and that the design work and the artwork is very good. So that's it. I just wanted to show that off and tell people that if you want to support Retro Rogues, here's a fun way you can do it. Again, it's KirbyT's.com. It's KRBYTS.com. There'll be a link actually on the Retro Rogues page on Facebook as well. But again, we've got right now to start off with, we've got these designs here. And again, the red one is going to be the distressed one. And I'm going to change the graphic so that it reflects. Man, I'm doing such a horrible job of trying to show this off. It will reflect this distressed. Well, anyhow, you get the idea. It'll reflect this design. Yeah. So yeah. So anyhow, that's all of that. I just wanted everyone to see what we got going on here, and we hope that you'll support the show and you'll check this out. This is going to help us pay for some other additional things that we want to do to help grow the show and grow the fan base. I think it's a fun way to show that you're a member of the Rogues Gallery and show your support for the show. So,
and I think it's really important to point out, you did mention it, but basically, if folks have their own designs that they're interested in producing their own shirts, basically this is a service that will be provided that will allow them to do that. So, you're directly competing with a lot of these other print shops out there, like Teespring and things like that you're going to be doing the same kind of service for other folks, which I think a lot of people, they're going to find that mind blowing, but I think that's awesome. So, so just keep that in mind if any of you folks out there, because I know obviously Dave has a lot of friends that are artists. So do I, actually. I have a lot of friends that are artists from my days at the Comic-Con and doing independent comics myself. So if you have some designs, send them over to KirbyT's, and Dave can look into producing the shirt for you. So I think that's really exciting. Although I have to say, I love the designs that you have so far, Dave. Just the ones that we're showing right now on screen, they look great. Especially some of that red skirt stuff. Of course, I'm very excited about the Retro Rogue stuff, but some of the red skirt stuff really does look awesome as well. So we have talked about that we probably going to at some point start incorporating our avatars, because we really haven't done a lot on our avatars. My avatar is actually seen in the warning graphic, so it's probably the most prominent one that we have right now because we see it every time in the warning graphic. That's my avatar. But then Dave has sort of it's like a giant Japanese robot kind of thing, right? Like almost like a Transformer Shogun kind of thing. And that's Dave's avatar. Actually, I'll put mine up real quick too, so you can see. As I said, mine is pretty prominent because of the warning graphic. So I appreciate that, Dave, by the way. But we're talking about doing stuff with that as well. And even doing stuff along, in the future, maybe we'll do some stories with them, all sorts of stuff, but definitely T-shirts. So keep that in mind, everybody. And Bobby, he's already commenting. He says he's getting my Rogue shirt on payday. Thumbs up. Awesome. Looks awesome, cool. Dave. And Bobby, we really appreciate your support. We really appreciate that. So that stuff, as Dave said, that goes to support the show. It goes to support Dave's new business venture as well. But when you wear a Retro Rogue shirt, that's basically free advertisement for us. So we really appreciate that. If any of you folks do that and you wear it, loud and proud, at events, things like that. Granted, right now, I don't know how many events you're going to, but still, when you're going shopping or whatever you're doing, getting your essentials, whatever it is, that's free advertisement for us, and we really appreciate it.
And I like the black one, but this, I'm telling you, this distressed one is cool. This one is killer. This is my favorite that I've designed so far of all these shirts I've put together. And I had an idea for it. Like I thought this will be cool, but until I actually, threw it on the platen and was actually pressing the shirt and taking a look at it and seeing how it was actually going to turn out, I wasn't 100% certain on it because it was kind of an experiment. And I really, really like it. And I really managed to push the size of what I can do. So just so everyone knows, this technology, this method that we're using to produce these shirts, this is a totally new, well, not totally new. It is a new process. It's state of the art. It's not like traditional screen printing. It's actually something that's slightly different. But it enables me to actually print shirts again on demand. This is print on demand T-shirts. So that's the thing that's really cool about it. So that's like, Eric was saying, if you have, you've got a character from your comic or whatever, you want a shirt of it, you can't do 12 shirts, you can't do 24 shirts, you can't afford the screen charges and all the other things that go into traditional screen printing. The thing that's really cool about this, you just send me a message to the website, tell me what you're wanting to have done. I'll get you to upload the artwork to me, and then I can set it up and then print you one shirt at a good price. That's the big thing. One shirt at a good price. The shirt's not going to cost you $28. It's not going to cost $30. It's not, it's going to cost you a reasonable price, but still be a nice quality garment at the same time. So you can have your favorite character, you can have like your creator-owned character, but also too, you and some friends are, you're doing a bachelor party thing in Vegas and you need some shirts, hit me up, man. I can help you out with that. So, and that's the thing that's really nice. No minimum orders. So that's the thing that's really cool about it. But again, specifically for Retro Rogues, take a look at the designs, see if you find a shirt that you like, and, just support the show. Jane my mom has actually she's already bought a shirt. She's supporting the show. So that was really nice of her to do. So, but no, just check out what we got going on here, and hopefully get a Retro Rogue shirt and wear it proudly. So,
absolutely. And like I said, they look great. So I'm definitely looking forward to getting mine. That's for sure.
Yeah, very cool. And Eric's, his is actually printed. It's in the bag. I just got to get it in the mail to him. So, and I'll be doing some huge mailings. I've got all kinds of packages I've got to send out. That's actually going to be happening. That will finally be happening this week. I have been so busy getting the website and getting all the equipment set up and testing everything, making sure everything works the way that it's supposed to. I have been doing all kinds of tests, trying to calibrate to print photos on shirts, all kinds of crazy stuff. I wish I could show you guys the thing that I printed I'm the most proud of. That was the test print. I know Eric has seen it, but we can't really show it because if it gets out, I'll get in a lot of trouble. But anyhow,
intellectual, somebody else's intellectual property. I guess that's the easiest way to say it there.
Yeah, but it's a shirt that all us big guys want, we can't get. So I made that happen. So there you go. But that I've got this everything in here now where I can ship directly from my house, which is really nice. So it's going to make it easier for me. Like when we get back to doing the sketch cards for people commenting again, hopefully we'll be doing that next episode. It's going to make it a lot easier for me to get those in the mail, so the wait won't be as long. And also, number two, the thing that's going to be really cool is we're going to have Retro Rogue shirts too if you comment pretty soon. So all kinds of fun things are in the works. So
very, very cool. That's awesome. And Larry's checking in. He's saying hi, Dave.
Hey, how's it going? Nice to see you. Well, nice for you to be here. I can't really see you, but it's nice that you're here. So.
Yeah, it doesn't go two ways yet.
Yeah, I know. I
will know. Eventually. I'm sure that's coming. That's coming.
So, but anyhow, enough about KirbyTs. But I just wanted to talk about that and get that out there. So hopefully people will take a look at what we've got going on there, because it's a fun way to support Retro Rogues, and wear your support for the show. So
absolutely. And there's one more image for everybody there, so you can see some of the stuff that we're offering. You can see the 3 Retro Rogue shirts very prominently there, and also a very good red skirt shirt. By the way, I've seen this image before. That's pretty awesome. And some additional red skirt shirts. So what's the shirt on the corner there, Dave? On the bottom corner there.
Oh, that is actually this is the red skirts. So it's the homage to the motion picture.
I thought that was in the top. I thought there was another one below that.
Oh no, I'm going to show that one. I just took a second here to show off that one. Let me go back.
I just didn't recognize it. That's why I was asking.
Are we talking about this one over here?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay. Well, this is actually the eagle from Dark Meat.
Oh, right on. Okay, cool. Very, very cool.
And in the back has a tag print, and it says, "You're such a parody, a truly feeble and ridiculous imitation." So it's a quote from the book. So
very, very cool.
But Dark Meat, the Janimal and I, we actually created Dark Meat. It is a sort of a loving parody and salute to Dark Knight, or Dark Knight Returns. And it's about a chicken who believes he is Batman, or a Batman-like character. He doesn't believe he's actually Batman, but a Batman-like character. And it's kind of an industry commentary because he actually battles some characters that if people see it, they'll be like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. But it's kind of some industry commentary at the same time. But I'm just folding these up here real quick so they don't wrinkle too bad. And actually, I have a test print. Well, maybe we'll show that off on the show next time. But I have a test print actually for the Eagle shirt because I've been calibrating the printing for the really complex images with a lot of tones and stuff, so that it looks really good. Like the logo stuff is pretty straightforward in order to hit, But they're really images with a lot of complex colors and stuff. You actually have to go in and actually configure it so it'll actually look good when it prints. So, but very cool. All right, are we good to move on? I'm not sure if Eric can hear me.
I said sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Cool. All right. So we're going to go ahead and we'll segue over to our main topic. The first topic for tonight. Get the graphic up. All right. So if you wouldn't mind sharing my screen. Okay. So we're going to start off by talking about the Netflix show that is actually called Warrior Nun. Now, I am somewhat familiar with Warrior Nun because I know it is loosely based off of Warrior Nun Ariella that Antarctic Press published back in the day. So I'm going to read the synopsis here a little bit, and then we'll just kind of talk about the first episode. Again, this is Warrior Nun. The episode is named Psalm 46:5. I'm going to read you the synopsis here that's on IMDb. It basically says, after waking up in a morgue, an orphan teen discovers she now possesses superpowers as the chosen halo bearer for a secret sect of demon-hunting nuns. And again, like I said, this is based or loosely based off of Warrior Nun Ariella, the series that was created by Ben Dunn that used to be published or might still be published by Antarctic Press. The cast is a lot of people I was not terribly familiar with. Alba Baptista, Toya Turner, who actually plays Shotgun Mary. That's another character some people that read the Antarctic Press series back in the day would be very familiar with. Kristen, Lorena Andreas. It's a lot of interesting sounding names. I didn't recognize many of them, but that didn't hurt. That didn't hurt the show at all. So let's go ahead and just talk about our initial impressions. Do you want to go ahead and go first, Eric?
Yeah, I can go ahead and go first. I apologize. I lost some of my articles and things like that, but I'll get them back later because I did make sure to tag them. Okay. As Dave mentioned, one thing that's interesting about this is, first of all, I am familiar with the comic in terms of that I know it exists, and I remember vaguely when it came out. It would have come out in the later part of my high school days, and so it was kind of like on my radar a little bit. I remember, you can see with the image that Dave put out here, that you can actually see one of the comic covers here. And of course, it is very striking. It's very striking. I remember it being kind of controversial. I myself actually did attend Catholic high school and Catholic elementary school. I even went to a Catholic college for a semester. So I'm very steeped in that. My family was very religious and very traditional Catholics and things like that. So I remember, when this imagery and stuff like that came out, I didn't know exactly what to think about it because I thought it might be a little bit kind of like, sacrilegious. So I never actually really read the comic book. I'm very familiar with Antarctic Press. And in fact, there was another series that they did. Dave, I'm not sure if you're that familiar with it. I believe it was called like Ninja High School or something like that. That Bill Dunn also did. The creator of
Ninja High School. That was quite popular.
Yes.
And then in the interest of full disclosure, Antarctic Press did self-publish Star Gods, my first creator-owned series. So
there you go.
I'm very well steeped in it, and I'm very familiar with Warrior Nun Ariella, or at least Warrior Nun in a general sense, because they were Warrior Nun was one of their big hits at the time. Antarctic Press was making toys, and Warrior Nun actually was very successful for them. And they were in the process. They actually attended a licensing show, and one of the properties they were pitching was Warrior Nun, which is interesting because it's a Netflix show now. And in addition to that, they were also pitching Star Gods at that same show. I have materials that actually have, like, it's a sample book that they were handing out to attendees, and it has information on actually both of these properties. So,
and then Larry says, if I recall right, Dave doesn't like ninjas. Is that true, Dave? Larry says you don't like ninjas.
Okay, so it's not that I dislike ninjas. It's just I consider myself more samurai than ninja. So
I gotcha. Okay.
So there's
That's
just a
okay.
Yeah, there's just a rivalry that exists between samurai and ninja. So I don't dislike them, but I don't necessarily trust them either.
Well, the reason I brought that up was because I remember the Ninja High School comic all over the place, going to comic book stores in that era. I don't remember Warrior Nun as much, but I do remember it. I think they even came out with a limited, like one of those direct market figures for it at one time that was pretty striking. But again, the imagery was something that especially at the time, I wasn't sure what to make of it. So I never really picked up the comic and actually read it. I don't think I even really leafed through it. It kind of was like, I don't know, forbidden. Even though nobody told me I couldn't take it, it was just in my mind. I was all like, I don't think that's something that I would like. It's kind of funny because doing research for this episode, I decided to look into the comic a little bit more, and also to try to find out what's different from the comic and the television series. And I even went to Bill Dunn's Facebook and saw his comment. And it's kind of interesting because it sounds like a lot of the fans of the comic book are kind of upset about the show because it's very different. The show is very different from the comic book, especially some of the articles that I read as far as the content. The creator himself, he actually said that he understood the differences. In other words, he was not criticizing them. He was saying, hey, I get it. He actually, what he kind of implied was, hey, if this show is really popular, maybe we can get an anime that's going to be more faithful to the comic. So I thought I would just kind of throw that out there, just because I don't have any personal knowledge of the book, so I can't really compare. One of the main reasons that we wanted to do this review was obviously the show just came out on Thursday, so it's very topical. But the other thing is, I think Dave and I both, we like to review things and look at things that come from independent media. And, Antarctic Press is a very independent, comic book publishing company. It's not DC. It's not Marvel. As I mentioned, I recall the Ninja High School stuff as a kid. What I also really recall was for a while, Antarctic Press had the Robotech license. And I used to check out quite a few of those. I think I actually own a fairly decent number of the Antarctic Press Robotech comic books. So interestingly enough, they actually got into licensing as well. They licensed a different product, rather than licensing their original product.
Yeah, they had the license for Robotech. They also had the license at one point for Gigantor, Captain Harlock. Those, again, talking about anime. The Antarctic Press was an interesting publisher. I'm going to spare everyone some of my stories I usually tell because my anger has mellowed with my age. Because of some things that happened back in the day. But they're a pretty prolific publisher. They're still around. They're still going. They've been able to license their characters into various media, as represented here by the Warrior Nun Netflix series. And I'm happy to celebrate their success. I think that's really cool and awesome. So let me talk about my initial impressions just briefly here. So I, again, was familiar with Warrior Nun primarily because of my association with Antarctic Press back in the day, as I mentioned earlier. It's not a series that I read. I think I actually looked at the figures probably more than anything, because Antarctic Press at the time was helping us to actually launch a Star Gods action figure line that unfortunately didn't come to pass. But so I was probably more familiar with the action figures per se. And so I walked into this a little bit steeped into the iconography, which the iconography from the comic is completely gone. I mean, it's not that it's unrecognizable. It's just not the same thing visually. I don't think it hurts the production necessarily. To me, it had a weird kind of Blade vibe at times. And then a little bit of the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, for those people that might have seen Sabrina on Netflix. It kind of, for me, fell in between those two productions, somewhere in between Blade and Sabrina. I'm going to be honest with you, I was kind of surprised. I found it kind of interesting, and I was curious to see more. I wasn't expecting that. When it first kind of started, I was like, okay, all right, this is going to be whatever. But as it went on, I found myself actually kind of very intrigued by the lead character's story, which is interesting too, because our lead character is not Ariella, the character from the comic. I don't want to get into a lot of heavy spoilers, but that's not who we follow. We actually follow someone else, and her story I found very interesting. And again, as Eric mentioned, I could, I'll be honest with you, I could tell from just watching this, they changed a lot. I mean, having not even read the comic, I could just tell you from just visually, like they've changed a lot about this particular production. And I picked this image because if you can see in this image, this is what I'm talking about. It reminded me very much of Blade. And if you've seen Blade, specifically like Blade 2, it had a lot of that kind of feel about it. But like I said, I was surprised. I kind of enjoyed it. I didn't hate it at all. I was curious to see the second episode, which is surprising because there's not a lot of action. Did you notice that, Eric? There's not a lot of action in this. It's just a lot of story.
Yeah, it's very much, I guess, a setup episode, which makes sense. Obviously, it's the pilot, so it does make it obviously is trying to set things up. I saw a lot of questions after the first episode, which I guess is which can be good, but they weren't necessarily like some. I think they could have put a little bit more into it to give me a little bit more of the world and what it is that I'm actually looking at. My guess is that there's a lot of stuff that they want to reveal later in the series, and that's why you don't get a lot of that information. So I did go back and try to look at the source material more. As I mentioned, I haven't actually read the comic book, so I kind of wanted to know more about the source material. So I went ahead and I did read some articles about it, and I did pick up on what you said, Dave, that this is a completely different character than the character that's in the actual comic book, which I thought was really weird, and I'm not sure why they decided to do that, other than maybe the obvious reason of age. I don't know what age the original character is supposed to be. Maybe they just wanted a younger actress, that kind of a thing, to kind of tell the tale a little bit better in a more quite frankly obvious way, I guess. I don't know. I was actually more intrigued by the source material as I read it. I'm just going to put that out there. I wanted to go ahead and actually go out and buy a Warrior Nun comic book and compare it to the show after watching this. So in that sense, it's really kind of good, because it got me interested in the source material, made me think, I want to pick up some Warrior Nun comics and take a look at them and compare them to the show, because the research that I did, I think the comic book premise is better than this one. That's just my initial impression without ever having read any of the books. I'm just strictly going by my research and the articles that I read that sort of compared the two and just gave you a basic kind of summary of what the comics were like and how it's kind of different than the television show. So I was actually more intrigued with the setup material of what I read about the comic book than I was with the show, which I think is kind of ironic. But it's also good in a way because the show made me interested in the comic book.
Well, and that's one of the great things about media, is if you can do a good job, you can do that. You can get people interested, hopefully in the source material, so they're going to want to go back and investigate it. And it's curious, Eric, because if it were me, I would try and find a trade or collection of the original Warrior Nun comics, because I think that's where you're going to see probably your greatest contrast between what they're doing here in the show versus what the original comics might have been about. Like I said, I mean, I found the show to be kind of interesting, though, even with that sort of, because I could tell they changed a lot. But I still found it kind of interesting. But again, like I said, I really like Blade and that world, that kind of idea. And this felt heavily influenced stylistically anyway by Blade. I mean, even with the rave scene, I was waiting for them to.
I was just going to say that. That's exactly what I was going to say, Dave.
Yeah.
Was that rave scene? Yeah, it totally brings me back to Blade. In fact, for we had some issues in preparing the show, in that for our retrospective segment, we kind of had to switch things at the last minute, because it turned out what we were going to review initially wasn't on the streaming service that we both have. So we have to coordinate that stuff, and we didn't realize, oh, this thing actually isn't on that streaming service. So we were scrambling for the second part of the show. We decided on Batman Mask of the Phantasm, in large part because that's currently available on Netflix. So it's available on a wide streaming platform, and we're reviewing a Netflix show anyway. But the one that I was going to suggest, Dave, at first was Blade, but I couldn't find it on anything. I couldn't find it on anything that I was sure we both had. In fact, I couldn't really find it on any of the subscription services, except I think it's on HBO now. It's actually on HBO now. Blade is the original Blade.
Interesting.
So, which I thought would have been a great contrast to the show. So I wanted to put that out there, because we didn't talk about that, but I was going to originally say, hey, let's do Blade, because it would be such a perfect complement to this show.
Yeah, the only difference is Blade kicks a lot of ass. Just gonna say,
it does.
As you mentioned, I found myself wanting to watch Blade.
Right. No, as you mentioned, there's surprisingly little action in this first episode, and of course you have the anticipation. And I've watched the trailer also. I did watch the trailer for the show, so I got to see some additional scenes from other episodes. Obviously, the promise is there for a lot more action to happen in future episodes. But as you mentioned, it is surprisingly very action light.
Again, that's why I said I would compare it to The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, or just Sabrina on Netflix. It sits in between Blade and Sabrina, because Sabrina, they do a lot of fun. Well, both of these shows are highly blasphemous, but anyhow, I was just going to say, Sabrina. That was a joke. Sabrina, like, kind of does a lot of fun stuff, but it's the same thing. It's a lot of setup. It's a lot of ambiance. It's a lot of, sort of quasi teen drama, and then something crazy, magical, whatever kind of happens. And that's what this reminded me of in the same way, because Sabrina will sometimes kind of play something out a little bit more than maybe a movie would. Like, a movie will set something up and then go straight for the throat. But I noticed that Sabrina and this show both, they have a similar kind of structure. But I liked Sabrina, and I liked this. That was the thing that was, because I'll be honest with you, because we discussed doing this, we thought, we'll check it out. Why not? But because I did not care for the Witcher so much, I was kind of thinking, like, there's no way in the world I'm going to like this thing. But I kind of found it interesting. At the end, when it ends, I found myself kind of actually wanting to see more, and I was kind of surprised at that. But I enjoyed kind of what I did get to see of this world that they were crafting. And then part of it too, I think, is the fact that you don't get a lot of answers, because my imagination runs wild, and I'm beginning to go, okay, well, what about this and what about that, and it actually makes me more invested than maybe under normal circumstances I might have been. So that was the thing that surprised me the most about this. I'm actually curious to see what happens in the second episode. So,
well, that's obviously good. That's what a first episode is supposed to do. Is it's supposed to draw you in to watch the second one. And it's kind of funny, I see in a lot of reviews, sometimes you get this, even from people that are highly critical. They'll say, like, okay, well, I usually judge a series by its second season or by its fourth season. I mean, I've literally heard things that I think is that stupid. Obviously, every show, it's all about that first episode, whether it's going to make you want to watch the second episode or not. And as Dave said, this episode did what it was meant to do for him. It made him want to watch the second episode. I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure if it did the same for me. I am open to continuing to review this show. I didn't hate it, but I felt like, as I alluded to earlier, I felt like it almost didn't give me enough in sort of a bad way. Again, I am more interested in my research of the source material than I am in this show right now. I'm more feeling like I want to go out and actually buy the comic book and check it out, because of the differences that I've heard between the two. And I'm like, I think the comic book might be more for me. And I'm thinking the show, I'm not sure. Part of the reason for that is that this show is very modern. So if you kind of like the modern, I guess the modern storytelling, I would compare this show very much in terms of a lot of the not so much the style, I guess the theme. I would compare the theme very much to the most recent incarnations of Star Wars and Star Trek. And I'm talking specifically about Picard, and I'm talking about Star Wars, The Fall of Skywalker, or whatever the last one was. I really hated that movie, so I'm not going to call it by its right name. But the central premise is the same. It doesn't really reveal anything to say this because it is called Warrior Nun, so you would kind of assume this. But it kind of has that same contrivance that we've seen many times before, where you have this sort of female, young female character that is like the key to everything. And that's kind of the setup that we're getting in this. And it's like literal. I don't want to get into the spoiler there until we actually go into spoilers, but it's like literally she is like the key to everything. And I've seen that so many times, I'm kind of getting sick of it. Does that make any sense, Dave?
It does. It does. It makes a lot of sense. I was just going to point out the fact that it's weird because it feels like it's hitting on that same thing. And what you're talking about is what they sometimes refer to as the Mary Sue. It's kind of what they...
No, I would not say this is Mary Sue, by the way. I would not say that.
Okay.
I wouldn't say that because the way that she gets her powers, people might argue that's Mary Sue, but it's like basically saying, again, I don't want to do a spoiler, but it's basically saying like no object can give you powers. That's kind of like saying the Green Lantern is a Mary Sue because he puts a ring on, now he has powers. Well, that's just the contrivance of the power. The idea that an object gives you power, I get that.
Right.
No, I totally get that.
Yeah, you make a good point. All I was trying to get at though is that the difference in terms of context is that Warrior Nun is a comic book series that goes back to 1994.
Right.
Like this exists because Warrior Nun came out of this period in the comics when they were doing quote unquote the bad girl stuff. So which
blade comes to mind? Lady Death comes to mind. All that stuff was really popular.
Exactly.
And by the way, that stuff was much more popular for me. I have a bunch of Lady Death, and I do have some Witchblade, but I don't have any Warrior Nun.
Yeah, but I'm just going to point that out because it's interesting because I think contextually, the way that they make the show work is it fits within that modern context, and they've kind of retooled it, to kind of again to fit in with that modern approach. But it's interesting because the character, when you dial it back, I mean, she comes out of the bad girl era of comics. Now that doesn't cheapen anything. That doesn't change the value or the context of the story. I don't mean it any way like that. It's just that sex appeal was part of what they would use. You know what I mean, to kind of sell the concept. So it's interesting in this because it's completely different. I don't see them leaning into that at all. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But I just wanted to point that out because it does feel very contemporary because of how they've kind of retooled it to fit within a modern aesthetic. But I just want to point out that this character and a lot of these concepts, they predate this thing quite a bit. So a percentage of what we're seeing was the creator's original intention. And that's kind of neat, that even back then, because, it's kind of cool and weird because for me, most of my comics have had strong female, protagonists, that they're always the lead. Akio with Bushy Tails, she's kind of got that chosen one complex kind of idea going on. Mary in Red Skirts is kind of the same way. But I think a lot of us we're just trying to portray just a female lead character because at the time, specifically with Bushy Tails, it was still kind of novel and kind of neat. You'd see it in Aliens and you'd see it in different things, but it wasn't quite like it is like right now in pop culture and current culture where it feels like it's everywhere. So
yeah, that's exactly the problem I'm having. I compare it very much to like the silent film era. And in the old days of the silent film, if you had a villain, he had a top hat and he had a big mustache and he would twirl it menacingly, so you knew he was the villain. Another thing they used to do was the villain always had a black hat, the hero always had a white hat. So you immediately knew, who was who, and it was very, because storytelling was limited back then. You literally didn't have sound. So, you kind of had to do these visual cues so you knew what was going on. The problem is, of course, as that goes on, it becomes really overused, and you kind of like you kind of know things before you really want to. You can't have that reveal that, oh, he's actually the bad guy, that kind of a thing, because you already knew. You knew the guy with the top hat, the black hat, and the mustache. You knew he was the bad guy. That's back like I said, like way back in the silent film era. So over time, those kind of contrived characters, those stereotypes, they became so overused, people just got used to it, and it got boring. And that's kind of what I'm feeling right now with this. Like what you said, there was a time when this stuff was surprising, and you would be like, "Oh, wow, that's kind of a twist." The twist is gone as far as the female, the extremely overpowered female protagonist that is the chosen one. And by the way, I do want to clarify with the Mary Sue issue, because I don't like Mary Sue's, but I'm not accusing this particular show of having a Mary Sue. I am not accusing it of that. The Mary Sue thing is different. The Mary Sue thing is where you feel that the character is just too perfect. I don't feel that this character is too perfect. I don't feel like, it's quote unquote unearned, because in this particular case, again, it's kind of a minor spoiler, but it happens like right away. We're talking about an object that gives her power, as opposed to, her just sort of instantly being a Jedi, for instance, that kind of idea. Because we've never seen that before, where someone's just instantly a Jedi, knows how to use a lightsaber and all that kind of stuff. That's right, kind of where I'm coming from.
Right. And just to clarify, I was just saying that in this current era, that's sort of the thing, that's everyone goes, oh, well, this is a Mary Sue. I wasn't saying that you were saying this character is a Mary Sue. All I was doing was kind of, going ahead and throwing that out there, just because I feel like this doesn't really qualify as the Mary Sue idea in my mind.
No, it doesn't.
Also,
I agree with you,
because this concept goes so far back that it's just a completely different thing. It's just that this was literally just a comic with a strong female lead character. I don't, that was part of the point. So that's all I was saying, is that I don't feel like it qualifies for the quote unquote Mary Sue label, just because it existed before that was really too much a thing in my mind. So
no, I totally agree. I don't think this is a Mary Sue just by the definition of what a Mary Sue even is. What I am having an issue with is the Chosen Ones thing. The Chosen One thing, I've just seen it before, and I've seen it very recently in two major properties that I didn't like it. I didn't like the execution. I thought it was terrible. I'm never going to watch those things ever again. So they're fresh in my mind, and it seems like that's a setup that's being used more and more. And what it leads to is it becomes very predictable, and it takes, for me, it takes some of the fun away, and it kind of just takes away the whole point of, the contrivance before was, again, it was a shock. It was something that was like, oh, well, that's kind of like a neat twist. Now it's just been overused so many more, it's been overused so many times that, to me, it starts to fall flat. Now, that doesn't mean that I hate this first episode. It doesn't mean that I'm not willing to give the series a shot and see how they use this, going forward, this premise going forward, because the basic premise I do think is interesting. I absolutely do think it's interesting. It is intriguing. But as far as just the idea of whether, if I wasn't reviewing it, would I go ahead and watch the second episode? I would say probably not. But if we decide that we want to keep reviewing this, or if the Rogues Gallery is interested in hearing us talk about it more, and remember, in the context that Dave is very intrigued by this show. So it would be kind of interesting contrast with me kind of going in a little bit more deflated, and Dave going in, a little bit more hyped up. That actually could be some good material for our show. So I'm definitely open to continuing to watch it, but I wouldn't say that I would probably watch it if it was just me. I probably wouldn't watch the second episode.
Interesting. Yeah. So, but no, like I said, I found it kind of intriguing, and I would be interested to see a little bit more of it. But again, that's just my own personal, obviously, opinion. And like I said, I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting it to like the lead character. You know, I expected this to be a little bit more kitschy and kind of, what's the right word? It's interesting because a lot of what you're saying, Eric, I can see that because they have taken the character and put her in a very modern context, and to the point that the Chosen One concept is you know, it is overused, and the way in which they're going about it feels kind of by the numbers. But that being said, I like the lead actress a lot, and because of the specifics surrounding her character, I thought there was an interesting idea to explore. And again, I can't get into that too much without getting into spoilers.
That's a good segue because you said specifics. Why don't we talk about a few spoilers here, so everybody knows if you haven't watched the first episode, this is the time to put your fingers in your ears or whatever. Maybe go and get a drink or something like that, because it's only one episode, so we won't. There's not like a whole lot of spoilers in this anyway.
No.
So why don't we talk about some of those spoilers and talk about what we thought maybe worked or didn't work, what we liked, all that kind of stuff.
Well, the thing I found most interesting is the idea that the lead character was quadriplegic, and that basically she had spent a good period of time, just unable to move or walk or do anything. That was one of the concept I found most interesting about this. She's basically imbued with a powered object that it does bring her back from the dead, essentially. And we see her going out, and at first she's not sure if it's a dream. She's not sure exactly where she is, like referencing like heaven and hell, that kind of idea, or even purgatory for that matter. They don't reference that specifically, but it could have even been purgatory. So she's not sure, and so she decides that she's going to experience as much as she can until the dream ends or she wakes up or what have you. That was the concept I found the most interesting and intriguing, because she is seeing something that she's not quite sure what it is, and she's not sure if it's a delusion or going back to Dante's Inferno, if she's in some level and it's a concept or some part of like a level of hell or whatever. That's what I'm saying. It's like I'm probably reading more into this, and that's what I find the most intriguing. I'm curious to see how they take these ideas and they take these concepts and explore them. So that's why I would be curious to see a second episode, myself. So that's what I found most interesting, is the idea that she was quadriplegic, and now she's able to actually go out and experience and live life on a level that obviously she hasn't been able to do prior to this event. So tell me, Eric, what was the thing that...
Dave, that's actually a perfect example of why I'm kind of on the other side, because I have a different interpretation of that, and it gave me a totally different experience. Because I do think that's intriguing that she was a quadriplegic, and now essentially she's a superhero. She's got superpowers. She even says that in this episode, that basically she has superpowers. But what I didn't like was that I didn't really get to see what it was like for her to be a quadriplegic. I mean, it's basically all through dialogue. We don't even get like a significant flashback. There's like one minor flashback, but there's no significant flashback to even show what that was like. And so I didn't feel like when that scene, when she starts running, I didn't feel like it was earned at all. It just didn't feel earned. It just felt like it was just thrown in there because she's a pretty girl and she's young, and we want to see her running around happy. I had this image in my head of like doing an instant parody, and just think if it was some, fat old man who had been quadriplegic or whatever, and then he had the same scene. Would it work? would people be as invested if it was a fat old man that was running around frolicking on the beach like that? It would be comedic, right? People would laugh. And so to me, I just felt like that wasn't really, I think that the premise is intriguing. The premise of a disabled person suddenly getting superpowers just on its own merits is an intriguing concept. But we didn't really get into that. And I don't know if maybe they'll go back in flashbacks, but I don't like that. It's like, this is a pilot. I would like to have seen some of her life before this all happened. Now, granted, my guess is that they're going to explain that to us more as the series progresses, because obviously something was going on at that orphanage that's really screwed up, especially with the head nun. But then again, that's another contrivance too. It's like the head nun is always like evil. You know what I mean? Like, she's always a bad person now. I went to school with nuns, okay, when I was young, basically through first through third grade. We had nuns were still pretty prominent at my school. It's kind of funny, me growing up, there was sort of a transition from there being quite a few nuns at my school to almost none by the time I graduated in 8th grade from elementary school. So when I first started, like first through third grade, we actually did have a lot of nuns. And I remember Sister Valeria in particular, my principal, and she was awesome. She was stern. I mean, she was a hard woman, but she was awesome. I mean, if you behaved yourself, you know what I mean, and you were a reasonable kid, she was all over you. If you misbehaved, she slugged you. You know what I mean? That's just the way they were back then. And I didn't have a problem with that. So, you know, it's kind of funny to me that because now we always see now anybody who's comes from like a religious background or things like that, how it always seems to be depicted negatively. And that's another thing where it's sort of like a contrivance, a new modern contrivance, because back in the day, if you saw a nun in a habit, that was supposed to indicate, hey, this is a good woman. This is a pure woman. This is someone that, you know, that you can trust. You know, now the first nun that we see in this particular episode, she's like really screwed up. She's like talking about how the main character is like a devil spawn and things like that. When literally the first time she met her, she was the victim of a car crash when her parents were basically on vacation, and she became a paraplegic, and that's how she wound up at the orphanage. And it's like, how could you have a problem with someone like that? You know what I mean? What kind of trouble could she really be when she's a quadriplegic? So it's kind of like, you know, you can obviously that head nun is totally evil, totally screwed up. So stuff like that is kind of like, I've seen it so many times now in the modern era, it kind of rubs me the wrong way.
Well, that's, you know, yeah. I mean, like I said, not like I said, I can see what you're saying. I can totally see that. I would imagine, you know, that we are going to get some more flashbacks. We are going to get some more explanation. They allude to some things that weren't quite clear to me, and I apologize if I seem distracted. The dogs are in the studio. And because I correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't think they really come right out and say it, but they seem to allude to the idea that you know, that the sort of the priest guy who trains the warrior nuns or is in charge of supervising the warrior nuns, he asks her how she dies. I don't remember. This is really bad because I did just recently see it. Does she say exactly what happened?
No, that's another mystery. How she actually died is not explicitly stated. In fact, if you remember in the very first scene, you know, the priest the initial priest, not the one that's like you mentioned is either the trainer or the supervisor, which by the way, we don't know which one he is yet. If he's in some sort of authoritative role over the warrior nuns, but we don't know, like you said, we don't really know exactly what his role is. Is he sort of a mentor? Is he a teacher? Is he just their boss? You know, we don't know. Is he like Charlie's Angels? We don't know. So, but there was a priest in the first scene, and what he was doing was, it was weird. This is another thing I thought was really weird. Essentially, it's like his church is like a morgue. And so he's cataloging this death of this girl from the orphanage. And he asked for the reason of death. And the nun, the evil nun, she's all like, no, just leave that blank. And he doesn't challenge it and just says, well, that's kind of like against procedure or whatever, but okay, we'll go there. And then later on, the character you're talking about, the other priest, when he's doing his investigation to find out more about this corpse that came to life and ran away with their holy object, he again asks about how did she die, and we don't really get an answer. So clearly she's hiding something. Obviously the nun is hiding something, the one who runs the orphanage. She's hiding something, and she had something in for the girl, as far as like some sort of, I don't know, some sort of personality conflict or something, that she just hated this girl for some reason, who again was a quadriplegic. So it's like, you kind of sit there like, what would be the motivation for hating someone like that? Other than the fact, I guess, that you had to take care of them, which I can understand, that could build resentment over time. But it's kind of like, well, why'd you become a nun then if that's not what you want to do? So there is something going on there, and I would assume we'll get more information, later in the show, later in the series.
See, I seem to have the impression, judging by the way that the head nun lady was acting, that maybe the lead character, the reason or how she had died might have been from suicide, because that's quite a sin, and in certain religions it means you cannot enter heaven. And I could see that partially being the reason why the nun has such a really powerfully negative reaction to this young girl who's quadriplegic. If she felt like she just gave up and committed suicide, it might explain some of the judgment coming from her that is quite so harsh, because that is in certain religions, that is such a sin, and in some religions it's unforgivable. So,
right, and that's an interesting take, because I got the opposite take. I got the homicide vibe, that she killed her because she didn't want to take care of her anymore. So that's interesting, and that is something that I would be interested to see how that pans out in the series, as far as whether it is suicide, homicide, or maybe it's something neither one of us is even thinking about.
Yeah, that would be interesting. So like I said, that's part of the reason why I found it intriguing. And again, my suicide thing, that goes back to, again, what I said before. I am projecting into this story what I think is happening, and I am, moving the chess pieces around on the board, and answering my own questions and going, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if they're going to do that. And then, as we have learned, those of you who've been part of the Retro Rogues for a little while, I am often wrong with a lot of these ideas, and suggestions, and theories they have. And then I end up falling in love with my own ideas that I put together in my head and go, this totally sucks. It was nothing like I thought it was going to be. So,
although we did that with The Mandalorian, and we were wrong about, I don't think we got one thing right in our prediction of The Mandalorian when we did our lead up, but we ended up enjoying the series overall.
Oh, yeah.
So It's kind of funny. So even though it didn't hit any of our expectations, because, by the way, that is an accusation in toxic fandom all the time, that, oh, well, you're just upset because it didn't do what your little fan theory said, and you're an asshole and blah, 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 blah. No, that's not the case at all. Sometimes I just don't think it works. It's not because I thought that it's not like I'm going to hate this show because it turns out that Dave's theory is correct and she did suicide when I think she was murdered. That in itself would not make me like or dislike the show. It's all in how they present it, all in how it's implemented, and whether I ultimately feel that's earned or not. And it makes sense, and I go, oh yeah, that made sense. Maybe there was some little foreshadowing in that first episode that told us something. Obviously, Dave is seeing something there where he thinks, hey, I think she might have killed herself. Whereas I'm thinking she may have been murdered by the nun. So we have these different theories. One theory or not is not what's going to make me like or dislike the show. It's all in how they implement it. That's what it comes down to. If it feels earned and it feels like it makes sense with the rest of the show that we've watched so far. Dave, your mic is muted.
My bad. Sorry.
No problem.
Still getting used to that.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, here's the long and the short of it. I mean, I don't have any other spoilers I really want to talk about. I just I found it intriguing. So let's just bottom line it here. Unless you have anything else you want to add, Eric. I mean, you said that you're not sure unless we were reviewing it for the show. Bobby Chambers has a comment here. He actually just chimed in and said, was looking to check this show out. Do you guys think you will continue with it? So I think we should just get right to it and answer the question. I would be interested to watch episode 2.
Absolutely. Okay.
So just to see if any of my theory about the suicide is correct, and to see if they get further into the action, and to see how much more inspiration it takes from Blade. Now, Eric, how do you feel? I mean, would you be down to watch a second episode, or you kind of go?
Especially because of Bobby's comment, because he said he's looking to check out the show. So yeah, I'd be willing to definitely go to episode 2. So one thing I wanted to mention that's weird about Netflix that I've come to doing a show. I've come to determine I don't like this. Netflix does a dump. So basically, all the episodes are already available. Netflix really encourages binge watching, and it does make it difficult when you're reviewing a show because you don't know how long the Warrior Nun wave is going to last now. It's number 2 in the United States on Netflix right now. Interestingly, by the way, number 1 is Unsolved Mysteries. I didn't realize they did a revamp of Unsolved Mysteries, which I love that show growing up, and that's number 1 on Netflix right now. Crazy. But number 2 is Warrior Nun. And so we don't know if it's going to be number 2 next week because because what happens on Netflix is pretty much anybody who wants to watch it has already watched it, So it'll be interesting to see how that works out because it looks like we are going to do episode 2. And so we'll kind of see how that pans out because when we did Picard, CBS All Access released a new episode every week. When we did Mandalorian, both the regular show and Disney Gallery, they released one episode every week. So it allowed us to be very topical and review something that was coming out brand new every week. So that'll be interesting, too, to see how that goes as far as us reviewing the second episode of a Netflix series when I think a lot of people just binged it and, they've already watched the whole thing. So they already know everything. They know more than me, you know what I mean? Because I haven't watched any of the rest of the series yet. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. But yeah, I'm definitely down for it.
Cool. Well, interesting. We'll do that then, because I was searching for images, to put together the graphics for the show. And yeah, there was already people who were already just like, Warrior Nun, the ending explained. I'm like, does the ending need explanation?
Well, the other thing is maybe before the next episode, I can pick up a copy of one of the comics. And so I can actually provide a little bit more commentary about how I feel that works, because I do think that's relevant. Clearly this is not an adaptation of the comic. It's very different. It's like a comic. It's like a tie-in to the comic book. It's inspired by the comic book. And those are two very different things. And I think sometimes for the fans, that can be very disappointing. The fact that they don't really get to see the story that they know and love transformed to the screen, because that's what a lot of us want. We want to see what we saw in the comic book or what we read in the book or what we even saw in the television series when they make a movie. We want to see that in there. And this is clearly kind of its own thing. It's different. So that's one thing that I'm going to try to do is maybe get a little bit more on the comics to give a little bit more of that perspective of, what maybe I like in the comics and like in the series, or vice versa, or, where the conflict is where I don't like it, that kind of thing.
Interesting. Cool. So it sounds like, Bobby, we are going to give the second episode a go and see what we think. I like I said, I'm curious to see how the second episode unfolds, because like I said, I found the first one to be interesting, to me. So this will be fun. We'll check out the second episode and see how we feel about it. Cool.
Right on. And
all right.
Bobby does give us the thumbs up. So he has given us his approval that we're good to go as far as reviewing episode 2. So we appreciate that, Bobby.
All right. Cool.
And I did want to go back, since we've got a natural break in the show right now. Larry had a comment earlier when we were talking about the whole ninja samurai thing and your attitude towards ninjas and samurais. And he mentioned that you explained to him that ninjas didn't have honor like the samurai, and that was the sort of contrast that you put between ninjas and samurai.
Yeah, it's just their honor system is different. It's just not the same thing at all. I tend to explain it as they have no honor, because at one point, ninja were just assassins, and then eventually it became its own kind of thing, where they had their own code and everything. But initially, well, at least in certain classic stories, a ninja is basically a disgraced samurai. That's where they got a lot of their training. So then eventually it turns into its own thing. So yeah, that's kind of my thing. I just when I was training in the dojo, it was often explained to me the difference between the samurai and a ninja is that a ninja has no honor. So
originally, all ninja really meant was hired assassin.
Right.
It was only over time that it took on more of a specific meaning. So it was at first it was a general term, I think, for just a hired assassin, somebody that was hired to assassinate people. Then, of course, over time, I think they developed sort of a cult, and that goes back to the is there any honor among thieves and that kind of thing? Because the idea is, if you make a contract with somebody, you want to make sure that they're going to pull through and actually do it. So this sort of, I think, culture developed where it was like, okay, so I know if I hire these guys, they're going to actually fulfill the contract and do it. You know what I mean? So that's kind of like where their honor comes from. It's like, yeah, if you hire me to kill somebody, I'm going to do it. You know what I mean? So contrast that with the idea of the samurai. And the samurai, of course, they were supposed to protect the castle. They were supposed to protect the land. That was their main job, was to defend it, usually from other samurai, actually. So,
yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
No, yeah, it's very interesting, and then there were certain clans, and groups where the ninja did it turned into its own sort of discipline and following and whatever over time. But like I said, just the basic sense, that was kind of my my takeaway, and that was the big way it was always explained to us in the dojo, the difference between samurai and ninjas. Ninja has no honor. The story they used to tell us, well, no, I'm just going to give you the story. The story they used to tell us was, if you fight a samurai, he'll come to you, to your face, and you'll duel, right? But if a ninja is hired to kill you, he'll hide out in the john and wait for you to go out to the porta potty or whatever, and then stab you with a poison blade.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's the difference between the two. One will come at you straight on and say, "We're going to settle it," and the other one will stab you in the back when you're not paying any attention. So
right, exactly. Now, are you familiar with Amaradote and Master Ken? Do you know who that is?
Yes, I'm very familiar. I know exactly what you're talking about. So
ninjutsu is bullshit.
All right, there you go.
That's what I wanted to say. That's from Master Ken.
All right.
Amaradote, the true martial art.
Yeah.
And Bobby Chambers mentions never trust a ninja. And you are right, Bobby. That is good advice. Never, ever trust a ninja. Because, as Dave said, they will shoot you in the back or stab you in the back or whatever they're going to do, right? So, incidentally, by the way, they did use firearms. If anybody wants to call me out on that, they actually did use firearms. So don't even try, because they actually did.
It's interesting, too, because Batman is so closely associated with the ninja now. But when you go back and actually check out a lot of the original stories and everything, he used to be more closely associated with samurai than ninja.
He is more samurai than he's not.
Yeah. Exactly.
I think the reason the ninja thing comes up is because the idea of the ninja is that they operate in the darkness. Obviously, that's why they wear dark clothing and all that kind of stuff. They don't you don't run around as a ninja, during the day in your ninja costume. What they would actually do was disguise themselves during the day, and they would look like a peasant or like a shop owner or whatever. They were masters of disguise. They would only wear the ninja outfit at night. So in that sense, I get it. Batman being, a creature of the night, it makes sense. But as far as his code goes, no, not at all. He's definitely more samurai than ninja. He's not an assassin, Batman doesn't kill people, so
Right,
he's
right.
definitely not a ninja. Ninjas, that's the whole point, is they kill people. It's not like the Turtles, folks. It's not. It's just not. That's not
Yeah.
an That's not an accurate depiction of ninjas.
and I love the Ninja Turtles. So there you go. I'm not totally anti-ninja. It's just most of my stories that I've actually written in Tron, and most of the ones I've enjoyed, except for Ninja Turtles. The ninjas are usually the bad guys. So
that's true. That's true. Yeah. Man of Sand is here. Man of Sand, we haven't seen you in forever. And he mentions that samurai have a formal code called Bushido, which is true. They do have a formal code called Bushido, which I also compare very much to the Western concept of chivalry. And I've actually liked to compare samurai to knights, because in some definitions, they'll actually call a samurai a Japanese knight. But yeah, the idea of Bushido, that code of honor and all that kind of stuff, very different from the ninja. And Bobby mentions samurai ideas and ninja stealth. That's Batman, right? Samurai ideas with ninja stealth.
Yeah.
And Bobby says, you just started a full-on debate in my house. Hey, the samurai ninja debate is classic. I mean, come on, that's going to be with us for all of time.
Yeah. And and just full disclosure, I studied Aikido, and Kenjutsu for many, many years, and I'm very, very, very well versed in the samurai arts, or the way of the warrior, or Bushido, as Man of Sand so accurately and correctly pointed out. So, no, like I said, it's just. When I talk to people, I tend to sometimes just kind of fall back into stories from the dojo and kind of generalities. But whenever I used to, when I was writing Bushi Tales, for example, that the ninja start off as just the villain, when they were introduced in the story. But as the time went on, it turned out that it was a little bit more complex. As with all things in life, it seems very black and white, and it seems like you know exactly what's happening. But in reality, there's all shades of gray and machinations and strange things going on. And who knows, what's really going on, it feels like, half the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there you go.
Very, very true. So are we ready to go on to pop culture news, Dave?
Yes, I think so. Actually, I'm going to, let me, do you want to go first, or do you mind if I go first?
You can go first. I mean, the first news item I have has something to do with you. It's actually a follow up from last week, but it's up to you whether you want to go first or not.
Yeah, I'm just trying. I'm getting my story pulled up here. Let me get this over here on the screen. A very curious and weird one. So, no, if you wouldn't mind sharing my screen, this will be the first thing. And actually, I need to set up pop culture news, because I'm just jumping right into it, aren't I? We don't want to do that. So let me set it up real quick. I don't have the graphic up. My apologies. So I'm going to set up pop culture news, and then you can already see what my first story is here. So here in the pop culture news segment, we talk about. Oh, thank you, Eric. Here in the pop culture news segment, we talk about anything that's interesting that's happening in the world of pop culture news that we want to talk about, that struck our fancy, that we think is interesting, or we think that you would actually enjoy discussing with us. So again, it's just anything relevant. It could be collectibles, it could be TV shows, movie announcements. It doesn't matter what it is. It's anything happening in the world of pop culture news that we think you, our dear valued viewer or listener, would find interesting. So for my first story up tonight is something I was kind of shocked at and surprised at, and still not quite sure how to take it. But there's all these news stories breaking that apparently there's some interest and movement on actually doing a Tron 3. So there's a lot of news stories about this that you can find on the internet. This is just the one that I picked for tonight's show because I thought it was kind of interesting and intriguing. So this is on Cinemablend, and this is by Mike Reyes, and this story is actually from yesterday. And it says, apparently Jared Leto is in early talks for Tron 3 after all. So it says, for some inexplicable reason, the world of Tron and actor Jared Leto have been frequent dance partners. Earlier today, there were rumors reporting that their courtship was potentially going to be revived in the name of a third film inside the world of the grid. And it looks like those rumors are somewhat true. We say this because, as of a new report this afternoon, it looks like early talks between Leto and Disney have officially started. Per a story from Variety, the early rumors of Tron 3 looking into casting the Morbius star are indeed true. However, what remains unclear is whether the previous suggestion that this new film would be a continuation of the storyline that 2010's Tron Legacy left on the table is just as true, or if this is indeed a reboot of the entire franchise. In either scenario, this potential date with Destiny has been building for quite some time. So anyhow, you can find this actually on Cinemablend and read the rest of this article if you find it interesting and if it strikes your fancy. But I thought this was very unusual news. But like I said, all kinds of stuff breaking, talking about the potential of a Tron 3 movie. And then here, they're talking about Jared Leto actually being in the film. So I have seen a lot of stuff that I've liked Jared Leto in, and I've seen a few things that Jared Leto was in I didn't care for. So it'll just depend upon what character he's playing as to whether or not I will, at the end of the day, go, well, his involvement was perfect, or his involvement was crucial, or what have you. So tell me, Eric, what do you think about this idea of a Tron 3 and the fact that Jared Leto may be involved?
Yeah, I don't know what to think. I did hear rumors about the possibility that Tron 3 was back on. I didn't realize that Jared Leto was associated with that. Now, to be fair, the only thing I really know of Jared Leto is from Suicide Squad, and I hate that. I understand that he's, everybody, since everybody, there's always someone that says something different. But I've heard over and over again that he's actually a much better actor than that. So that even people that don't like Suicide Squad like me and don't like his version of the Joker like me, they still think he's a great actor. I know he won an Oscar and things like that. I just haven't seen that actual movie. So I kind of have a kind of a sour taste in my mouth about Jared Leto because of that. But that's not really what I'm concerned about, to be honest. Even though I'm not sure how he would fit in, I'm concerned more that this article is so open-ended and we don't really know if it's actually going to be Tron 3. It sounds like they're just calling it, it sounds like it's just a potential Tron project, and right now they don't know what it's going to be. If it is Tron 3, I think that's cool. I would like to see another version of Tron. I think that would be awesome. I should say not another version. I misspoke there. But I would like to see another sequel to Tron. I think that would be cool. I think that there's enough with that universe, with that concept, that you could do more with it. And I think there's a lot of fans and a lot of people that agree with me on that. Tron isn't something that I was really into, but I had a friend who was obsessed with it. And we went and saw Tron Legacy at the IMAX. So that's how obsessed he was with it. And I enjoyed it. It was a good experience. And I remember watching the original Tron growing up as a kid. But as far as just like totally remaking it or rebooting it where it's not a continuation, I'm not for that. And I'm curious what you think about that, Dave. Are you kind of open to any permutation, or are you kind of specific that you want it one way or another?
I mean, personally, I would like to see them connect the dots in some sort of manner, so that it actually is like a Tron 3. I think Tron is, in a sense, something that, while you could reboot it, I'm not exactly sure even how well that would work. It's such a product of its time, and it reflects some things now that would, they beyond fall flat. I mean, I think most people couldn't even relate to the concept or the ideas of, what video gaming was back then, and the fact that that's actually a real virtual world, and what you're playing on the screen is happening for real. That now is so completely, I think, would be foreign to certain people because of the basic concept that most video games are trying to do such a great job of either representing or replicating, life. Most of the really popular, video games, that it doesn't really sync up anymore. So I'm not sure if Tron is something you can really reboot, and still have it be the same thing, in my opinion. Technology's moved so far beyond it. So if they do a Tron 3, they keep it kind of within that world, I'm interested. If they do try to reboot it, I mean, isn't that what Ready Player One is? I mean, I don't understand what that turns into. So
Yeah, that is a good point. Although I do think that sort of the concept of Tron is a little bit different than what we sort of see. Like I haven't seen Ready Player One, but my understanding is it's virtual reality, right? Ready Player One, like you wear a headset and you go into the virtual world. Is that right, Dave?
yeah, it is. But
Okay,
but that's what that's kind of what I'm saying is
but Tron, by contrast, Tron, that's the idea that you were actually transformed into a digital world, like your body and soul, so to speak. So that concept, I don't think, has actually been explored all that much because it still is very much science fiction. So in that sense, I think Tron is kind of ahead of its time because anybody who did something with like virtual reality, right now, virtual reality is making leaps and bounds all over the place. But the idea of actually turning a person into zeros and ones, that's basically what happens. That's still intriguing to me.
well, that's what I'm saying. That's why because you were asking if I like the idea of a Tron 3 or something else kind of set within the world of Tron. And what the story is putting forth is the idea that it may be a reboot. All I'm saying is just if you reboot Tron and you try to look at Tron in a contemporary modern context, I don't understand what that is because I feel like that's already been done in Ready Player One. Because you're even though that is a simulation, or a virtual reality, not an actual cyber reality or digital reality or whatever you want to call it. I'm just saying most people would understand the world of Tron in a modern contemporary context through that kind of a lens. The idea that two characters are battling it out Pong style, I think would fall cold on some people. So that's the only point I'm trying to make is that I feel like that we've moved so far in technology that the idea of rebooting Tron, I think, changes the core concept of what it is so much because of where technology is today. I don't think it's really kind of the same thing. That's why I would prefer to see a Tron 3, because I would like to continue to explore that world and that idea of being transformed and put into that particular reality, partially because it's so visually striking and interesting, as opposed to just taking a look at the concept of Tron and then, flipping it and turning it upside down and say, well, what does Tron mean today? It's like, well, I think that's Ready Player One. So that's just my own opinion. So I'm just saying if I were to have a choice, I would much rather stay within the world as we understand Tron, and do a Tron 3 instead of, trying to reboot Tron. You reboot Tron, it's not the same thing. I think it's something else.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. And as I mentioned before, I would very much more support a continuation over a reboot. But you did get me thinking because I do disagree with you as far as Ready Player One. That concept, that's not Tron. That's just, I think that actually, as you got me thinking, I'm like, how would you reboot Tron if you stayed faithful to the concept of no, this is not virtual reality. This is you being digitized, literally digitized and turned into zeros and ones. And how does that look in a modern context with modern technology? You actually got me intrigued with that idea. It's like rolling around in my head right now. It's like if I was to do that, because obviously this was a representation, this aesthetic is a representation of what they kind of thought that might be, in the 80s, when technology was still, just starting to really come into the home. That's really when the home computer was really starting. and people were starting to think about these things. And so they tried to make this virtual interpretation of what it would be like to live in this digital world, not a virtual world, a digital world. And it's like, I don't know. I don't know how you would do that in a modern sense. I think that actually would be really challenging and intriguing to actually try to actually redo that concept, because it's not virtual reality. It's literally like an alternate reality.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I love the concept, and I understand the idea of, well, let's just approach Tron in a modern context and move from that point. And it's like, well, that sounds interesting, but to me, it brings up a lot of questions, because I find myself asking the most basic question of all, and it's like, well, what does that mean?
Right.
How can you change that world enough to make it reflective of a modern concept? Because if you're looking at the idea of being in a gladiatorial arena, right, as they display in Tron with the light cycles and all of that kind of fun stuff, and if you look at that in a modern context, it's like, well, modern video games, like if you look at Modern Warfare, I mean, that's just trying to represent the reality of real warfare. That's why I'm comparing it back to Ready Player One, because that's what Ready Player One did. It's like, well, that virtual reality in terms of the video game gladiatorial combat idea is so close right now to what the real world actually is. Then how do you how do you represent that and still have it be Tron?
Right.
That's where I'm coming from. So
yeah, that's interesting. Well, it's definitely going to be challenging, I think, for whoever it is that's supposedly producing or writing this. It'll be interesting to see, well, if anything comes out at all, because I remember we talked about before on a Streaming Wars segment months and months ago about the fact that there were rumors of a Tron series on Disney Plus, and that apparently was axed. It didn't happen.
Well, it'll be curious to see how this does or does not move forward, and what shape it does or does not take. Like I said, I'm a fan of Tron, and I would love to see a continuation for sure. So this I find kind of interesting, but the idea of a reboot and looking at it in modern context, I don't understand what that would be. So I definitely have to wait for a trailer for that one. But I just thought this would be interesting and worth bringing up on the show and talking about. So tell me, Eric, what is your first story that you have for this segment of Pop Culture News?
Well, this is actually, mine is actually a follow-up from last week. We had talked about on the show that Dave recently was involved in the making of a short film. It's actually a micro short. It's called Routine. And I have a few images from the premiere of Routine, which ironically Dave did not attend, but I did. Just to provide some context, this short film Routine was actually directed by Russ Emanuel, who's also the director of Occupants, which is the film that I'm an associate producer on. I also did some behind-the-scenes filming on Occupants. And we actually did a comic book tie-in to the film Occupants with Dave. Russ was the writer, I was the editor, and basically Dave did all the artwork. So that's a very rare comic book, by the way, but that's how we kind of know each other. And since then, Russ and Dave have done another project called Routine. And what's funny is we were talking off the air, Dave, you still haven't seen it, correct?
No, I have not, and I owe everyone a lot of apologies. Ripley, stop. Hold on, let me move this. Ripley's in here, and she's very interested in the microphone. So let me move the microphone so she doesn't look at her something.
She's intrigued by the fact that Dave hadn't seen his own movie yet.
Yeah, it's just a weird thing. I intended to be there for the Zoom premiere. I was excited about it, and I got into just so everyone knows, KirbyT's right now is basically based out of my garage, and so I've got all the equipment and everything out of my garage. and I'm, printing shirts, and that was a heavy production day because I was testing all the equipment, and I was actually doing a fairly, well, for my operation anyway, a decent sized run. And there's only one employee, me, so I was doing all the work myself, and I lost track of time, and then and I had my phone actually was sitting somewhere, and I still had my ringer off from the night before, so I wasn't even getting notifications or people are like, "Hey, where are you at? Hey, where are you at? Are you I didn't even see them. So again, my apologies.
I was one of those people. People sending Dave messages. Where are you, bud? Come on, this is your moment. This is your time to shine, man.
Yeah.
So as Dave mentioned, and it's funny because we were talking about Tron and we were talking about virtual reality, digitalization. I guess is that a word?
Yeah.
And all those different kinds of things. And as you mentioned, this was a Zoom premiere, and this is the first time I've ever gone to one of these, because I guess this is probably becoming more popular in the pandemic world, that folks are doing these sort of virtual premieres. There are virtual film festivals that are going on now. So this format, I think, is going to become sort of more popular for a while, I think, because I think that this is something that we're going to continue to see. So this is the first time I ever had this experience. And I do want to thank Russ Emanuel for inviting me. It's definitely got me thinking about how to do my premiere for Connection Established. And I'm going to take some ideas from this experience. But I did take just a few screen captures, so I thought I would show them to you. This is actually the poster for Routine, and we were talking about this a little bit off the air. This poster, basically, just to kind of explain it a little bit, the premise of this movie, it starts off with basically the main character waking up for a day and showing us her routine. So that's how it relates to the poster. So we can see here, this is her basically the main character getting up in the morning, and that's what the poster that they're using to promote the project. From the actual Zoom premiere itself, we did the little Brady Bunch thing. You can actually see the orange highlighted tile there, and that is Russ Emanuel, the director, with a lot of the cast and crew. I was basically a special guest. I appreciate it. I actually did get a special thanks credit in this film. I appreciate that, Russ. Thanks a lot. And the reason I got that was because I was the one who introduced Russ to Dave. And so this was a fun thing. Again, I've never done this. I've never used Zoom before. This is the first time I've even used Zoom, because I do a lot of my Zoom style stuff with StreamYard. We use StreamYard to produce the show. And so I don't use Zoom a lot. I actually use StreamYard for a lot of applications that you might use for Zoom. So that was interesting for me. Here's a picture of the actual main character, the main actress in the film. I apologize, her name escapes me at the moment right now, but you can kind of see Russ there in the bottom corner. And it's kind of funny because I just did this screen capture randomly, and they're both looking in the same direction. So the bigger image is actually from the premiere. That's actually from the film. And then you can see the little image of Russ sort of reacting to it as the film is going. And then we did another sort of the Brady Bunch style picture here, again, with a lot of the cast and crew. They had people here that were involved with the score. It does have a nice little score. There's a song featured in it that they actually, it's sort of like a kind of punk, rock and roll kind of song that's also featured in it. But it was a lot of fun, I have to say. It was really interesting. It's got me definitely thinking, about some ideas about how I might do something like this, as far as doing a Zoom premiere or something like that for Connection Established. But it was just a kind of a unique experience, and it's kind of interesting in this pandemic world how things like this are being accomplished, because they still are being accomplished, and it's kind of not nice. Russ even did a Q&A after showing the film. He actually showed it twice to us because it is very short. I would call it a micro short because it is less than 5 minutes, and I think technically that is the definition of a micro short. If it's less than 5 minutes, it's like 4.5 minutes. But I enjoyed it. I wish I could talk more about or show images of your involvement specifically, Dave, because Dave did some original artwork, but I feel like if I showed that would sort of be a spoiler. And so I think I have to be careful with that. I might reach out to Russ just to see if there's some stuff we could show on, on the show, or maybe Dave, you could reach out to Russ and see if there's anything that he thinks is appropriate for promotional use, because that's a big part of that's a big payoff of the film. Dave's involvement is a huge payoff of the film, because the film itself, like I said, is really, really short, and Dave's artwork is actually like kind of steals the show. It really does. I mean, it's excellent. You did a great job, Dave. It's really cool stuff.
Oh, well, thanks. It's like I said before, we talked about it. It's hard for me to get too specific about my involvement without it revealing, too much of the story away, because the artwork I contributed plays more of a storytelling role than you would think. Like if I was to tell you, what it was that I did in a general sense, you would like go, oh, okay, well, that's kind of fun. But when you see the execution of it, it's so integral. And again, like I said, I haven't seen it still, and I apologize. I've been so busy. But I know from talking to Russ, and I know what I've drawn, it's, if you show the wrong image, it gives something away, because it's a continuation of the storytelling. It's not really the end of the storytelling. So
yeah, exactly. That's a great way to put it. That's exactly right. And so that's why we have to be kind of cryptic in what we say. Like I said, it is a very short film, so it's hard to say too much about it. Other than I think people will enjoy it. So if you hear about this, I know Russ is putting it out there on the film festival circuit. So hopefully we'll have more news. We'll definitely follow this story as far as where you might be able to watch this film. And I just want to tell you, congrats, Dave. I think you did excellent work. And I was very impressed, and it's a fun movie.
Well, thank you. Along those lines, it's interesting because, I have been, I taught at the beginning of the show the launch of KirbyTs, and part of what helped make KirbyTs a possibility was actually the routine project, because I did get paid to work on it, which is really awesome. And that's what helped actually, get that actually launched. That was the last little bit I needed to push it over the edge and pull the trigger. So that this project was good in a lot of ways, but it also helped to usher in this other new venture, this other new thing. So it's all kind of cool how sometimes things work together and build and, lead to another path or open a different door. So, but no, yeah, thanks. I appreciate all the positive comments. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. And I'm very proud of what I've done and from what I had seen, because I have seen some of it because I was working on it. So I have seen some of it. So it's not like I'm completely in the dark. I mean, I kind of know, at least the live action portions of it, how that works. So, no, but it was a cool project, and thanks again for introducing me to Russ. I mean, if you hadn't brought me on to Occupants, none of this would have ever happened. So it's very cool. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. As I mentioned, actually, I did that in a public tweet too, because Russ said something along the same lines on my Twitter. I said, hey, I'm always happy to help a friend get work. So you don't have to thank me for that. I'm always happy to do that. But I did want to mention one thing about this film also, is that it was done, Russ does live in the Los Angeles area. He does basically live in Hollywood. He did this basically with like quarantine rules in place. So that's one of the other reasons that it's so short. And also it is very simple, because they were very limited in who they could have involved. So as my understanding is, it was basically just Russ, his director of photography, Emil Harris, and the actress. And I apologize, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, because I did think she did an excellent job. They were doing it with these sort of quarantine, these shelter-in-place rules, which are pretty strict in California, stricter than they are here in Arizona. And interestingly enough, that does relate to my project, because we took a totally different approach to doing a film with the shelter-in-place rules, in that we did it kind of the way that we're doing our show right now. We basically did it on StreamYard. So we didn't have the actors actually interact at all, except for one scene where the director of photography did have to do a green screen setup for one actor. So we did have, two people together in a room for one of the scene. Well, I should say one of the characters, because he's in multiple scenes. So we took a little bit different approach, but I also related to that because I was kind of trying to do the same thing that Russ has already done, is in terms of trying to film something with all these crazy shelter-in-place rules and things like that. It is a challenge.
Well, and I will mention that one of the, my contribution, the thing that makes it unique, is in the same way that the Occupants comic book, basically, shows you more of the world and is able to do more in terms of budget and setting than what the film actually can do. In the same way, because of what's going on, with the pandemic and everything, my contribution does the same idea. It expands the world, and you get a better sense of what may have actually been possible to film if maybe circumstances had been kind of different. Because but on the same point too, I think it loses some of the novelty. I think there's something novel in the approach, and again, that was all Russ's idea. It's not like I had this idea at all. He just contacted me out of the blue and said, "Hey, I'm working on this thing and I want to try this. What do you think?" And I'm like, "Well, that's a terribly interesting concept and idea." And it takes something that a lot of us have seen before, but it uses it in a slightly different way, and it makes it a little bit more unique. And so, but that's the thing that's kind of fun, is that, my contribution kind of helps to fill in some of the gaps because of the restrictions. It does kind of take you out into the world and gives you a better sense of what's sort of going on. So,
right on. Yeah, I agree with that. And it is a unique approach, and it kind of shows you, that's kind of how this is how people go forward. This is actually how people achieve greatness, is that you take a crisis situation and you actually use it to your advantage to do something different and cool. And this is a great example of that. Like that, this approach to, well, there's certain things I just can't film right now. I really just can't film on location right now. It's just not a possibility. It's out of my hands. So, hey, maybe I'll get a comic book artist involved and actually show you some of the imagery that I can't film right now. It's brilliant. It's a great idea. And who knows? It's a model that might be emulated by other filmmakers in the future. And you may be a trendsetter there, Dave. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Sometimes being a trendsetter ain't all it's cracked up to be, but this is a fun project to be a part of. So,
I hear that. I definitely hear that. Now, Matt. I'm sorry, Dave. Did you have any other pop culture news?
No, that's going to be it for me for pop culture news, because I knew we were going to be talking about KirbyTs, and I didn't want to chew up too much time. I do have a Streaming Wars story for later, but that's it for pop culture news for me. So.
Well, look, I want to follow up on one of our previous stories, and an unfortunate theme that we've had on the show recently. So I wanted to talk about this because we were talking about what people are doing, to try to deal with the pandemic and to deal with shelter-in-place orders, to deal with quarantines, all those kinds of things. That's just the world we live in right now, and we have to deal with it, and we have to find creative ways to deal with it. That's how we go forward. That's how we achieve greatness, folks. Again, it's like you take lemons and you make lemonade. Well, I thought, from my perspective, I was pretty excited about the decision that San Diego Comic-Con made to go virtual this year, because I haven't gone to San Diego Comic-Con in years, and I was like, hey, now I get to attend San Diego Comic-Con this year, because it's been, gosh, probably 10 years, if not longer, maybe not quite that long. I think maybe 2011 or something like that was the last time I went. But it's like, it's been a long time, and I missed it. I do miss it. I mean, it's a huge convention. It is very corporate now, that's for sure, and that's going back many years. But I still enjoy it, and I enjoy. To this day, I've enjoyed getting all the news from Comic-Con, like watching presentations. New trailers will usually come out. I'll watch a lot of the panels. And I felt like, hey, this is kind of cool. They're going to be doing this virtual convention. Well, maybe not. So Cosmicbook News, they have this article here. This was posted just yesterday. And the headline reads, Marvel Studios, DC, sitting out of Comic-Con at home. So it says, despite having a slew of upcoming content, Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios are said to be sitting out of the upcoming Comic-Con at Home virtual convention. Marvel.com recently released the Marvel schedule for the Comic-Con. So that's Marvel.com. So you have to understand, that's basically the comics division. It said it didn't include anything from Marvel Studios, and now Deadline offers a further update. Quote, we hear Marvel is sitting on the sidelines. That's from Deadline. No specific reason has been given why Marvel Studios and Kevin Feige have chosen not to promote anything at the virtual con, which runs at the end of July. And it says maybe Marvel Studios will hold its own virtual con. It says Feige could have promoted the upcoming Black Widow movie, which, by the way, he says is in desperate need of promotion. I'm not sure what that's about. But he also mentions the Falcon and the Winter Soldier series was supposed to premiere on Disney Plus next month, which I didn't realize that. And he says Feige could have given an update on its filming process, which has been shut down due to the coronavirus. So I don't know what's going on with Falcon and the Winter Soldier. This would have been a good opportunity to let us know what's going on. Likewise, WandaVision and Loki are also coming to Disney Plus, but for whatever reason, Feige isn't promoting them. Also talks about Eternals and Shang-Chi. They're also in the pipeline, have started filming. So maybe Feige could have showed snippets of footage of that. So the author says, perhaps Marvel Studios will hold its own virtual convention, similar to what Warner Brothers is doing with the DC Fandom virtual convention next month. And that's something that Dave and I have already covered. We've talked about the DC Fandom. And, my take on it was, in a lot of ways, I'm kind of disappointed in the fact that DC is not supporting San Diego Comic-Con in sort of its darkest hour. We've talked a little bit about, the whole situation with Diamond in DC, the fact that they've got rid of Diamond. And, we've also talked about what's happening with like AMC and Universal, AMC theaters, where it seems like Universal is really sort of punching on them, and Warner Brothers kind of got into it also with Scoob. They didn't show Scoob at any theaters, and they released it, VOD only. So I don't know. I don't know what to think about all this, Dave. It's sounding like the big heavy hitters are not going to be involved with Comic-Con this year. What do you think about that, Dave?
Well, I'm not too terribly surprised. This is not the first time that, for example, like Marvel has set out, San Diego Comic-Con or Comic-Con International. Marvel's made I remember several years ago, and they were doing the Marvel Nights line. They made a whole point about the idea that they were going to sit San Diego out. And they've done that before in the past and made big fanfare out of it. And then they'll do something weird where it's like, they're not really there, but here's Odin's throne. I don't understand the logic in it. This time I understand the logic in it because there isn't really, quote unquote, a physical convention, but then it gets into this point. It's like, well, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you participate in this? Because it's a huge opportunity to, market and present your films and your products or whatever, to such in a sense, sort of like a captive audience and a potentially unlimited audience this time. Normally, we get updates from the floor of San Diego of things that are happening from people that are reporting, the various news sites and what have you. But in this context, this could be an almost unlimited thing, depending upon how many people decide to tune in, and see what's going on. But there's also this weird thing about exclusivity. And I think that's what we're seeing here. DC with their event, they're trying to do exclusivity and focus only on what DC's doing. And then so Marvel sounds like that they may later on down the road do the same thing, exclusivity. There's a lot of people that were theorizing that this was going to happen eventually anyway because of D23, that eventually D23, which is Disney's convention, was going to get all the big Marvel announcements and stars anyhow. So I feel like that to an extent, there is a percentage of COVID creating unique opportunities, but also too, I think COVID is not forcing, it's sort of causing companies to, do things on a faster timeline than maybe they would have originally had intended to do. So because there's been talk for years about the idea of, because Marvel pulling out in total from the San Diego Comic-Con, and there's also been talk that DC would, which is crazy to me because they're such a sort of a signpost, for when you do the convention. They usually have such a big booth. Everyone, you use the DC booth to help navigate, meeting up with people and planning out your convention experience. So, I'm not too surprised at this because of what's going on. But along those lines, like I said, I'm not also surprised at it too, because I think some of this was going to happen anyway.
Yeah, I think you're right as far as sort of the trend. I think it's completely and totally short-sighted because when you talk about exclusivity, especially when you're talking about the virtual world, I just don't know how that's going to work, because to me, the thing that's really cool about Comic Con is that there are so many things going on. So what you get a lot of sort of cross promotion. So you've got the anime people there, but they're still, kind of paying attention to what, is going on as far as Marvel and DC and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on. You can't know everything. I mean, it's impossible at San Diego Comic-Con to know everything that's going on, but certainly with the big, the really big franchises and things like that, you're still going to hear things, and the stuff gets in the news cycle, and it's this big kind of event. I don't know if you're going to get that doing your own. In fact, I'm going to predict that you're not. It's just not. It's not going to happen when you're that specialized, because now with like DC fandom, they're not going to get the Marvel people at all. They're not going to be paying attention. I don't think that their ears are even going to be open. So I think even just from a business perspective, this is terribly short-sighted. I do think you're right, Dave. The writing was on the wall even before the pandemic, as far as that this was kind of going to be the trend that, like you mentioned, the Disney event, D23, things like that like maybe people were trying to model it more like that. I think it's a terribly short-sighted thing. I really do. I think that the San Diego Comic-Con event, it really cannot be compared to anything. I mean, it's just massive in scale. Even other large Comic-Cons, you really can't compare it to San Diego Comic-Con, especially what it's become now, for better or worse, specifically with the movie studios, because so much movie news comes out of that event. So I don't know. I think it's terribly short-sighted, and I think it's really disloyal, because San Diego Comic-Con really needs the studios right now, needs them to kind of support their event. Kind of needs that content to maintain relevancy, and all these guys, it looks like they're just backing out and saying, well, you can't do the real event, so we're just going to do our own little virtual thing. And the question becomes, how do you put that all back together again? I don't know. I think that they're really going to be causing some friction in their future business dealings. And I would imagine, San Diego bounces back next year, they're going to remember some of this. At least I hope they will. Who knows? Maybe that will help them actually get more back into comics and less centered on the studio. So maybe there's a silver lining in all this. We'll see, right?
Yeah, we'll see. And like I said, to me, like a lot of this was just the writing on the wall. I think a lot of this is going to happen anyway. I think all COVID did was just sort of accelerate the timetable. And yeah, I agree with you, Eric. I do think it is short-sighted, but there's all kinds of stuff like that going on right now. And I'm curious to see, what the comic industry looks like when we get on the other side. If we're able to feel, relatively confident about what's going on by the fall, I think things could stay kind of mostly the same. But if we get into the fall and we still got some issues going on, I think we could be looking at a completely different landscape, not just the convention circuit, but I think just within the comic book industry in general. So
yeah, I agree. Although I would say when it comes to the comic book industry, my personal opinion is a lot of changes are long overdue in the comic industry, and there's a lot of weaknesses in the comic industry that have been really further, shown by the pandemic. In other words, those flaws were already there. I mean, it's always been problematic to have only one distributor in comics. That's something that I think was always a bad thing. Anytime you have a monopoly, I'm just really not for it. And I think I think it ultimately hurts the consumer. I think it hurts the small businesses. You know, I don't know. I mean, so but on this side, when we talk about the convention industry, you know, the convention industry was working really well. I remember when Phoenix didn't have a Comic-Con. I remember when we didn't have a big convention. Now we have one of the biggest, which, by the way, they were delayed as well. That was actually some news, I think, from last week that the Phoenix Comic-Con, which is now Phoenix Fan Fusion, they canceled the event this year because initially they postponed it and now it's canceled. So, you know, the Comic-Con industry, if you will, all these personal appearances, it's exploded. I mean, I don't think anybody would have anticipated, you know, back like when I was a kid, you did not see like top tier, you know, A-list celebrities like Chris Evans. You know, you didn't see them at conventions. Now you do. Now they go to conventions. You know what I mean? So it's like that industry is kind of exploded. Right now, it's kind of in a bad situation because these conventions aren't happening. But I think eventually they will again, and I'm curious to see how that's all going to pan out when they realize so many of these, you know, studios and things like that really bailed on them in their time of need. So we just have to see how that pans out.
It'll be definitely interesting to see. And, you know, like I said, unfortunately, you know, the studios bailing on the cons, you know, that this kind of stuff happens. So we'll just have to see. Like I said, for me, I am most interested to see what the industry looks like on the other side, and only time will tell. So we'll see.
Well, speaking of how the industry is going to look on the other side, we have another industry that we like to talk about. You want to talk about the streaming wars, Dave?
Oh yeah. So you want me to set it up here real quick? So here the streaming wars segment, we talk about things that are happening in the world of streaming wars. Now you'd be asking yourself, you know, what do you mean by stream? Are we talking about the stream that you get fish out of? What do we mean by streaming wars? Well, streaming wars, we're talking about all the different streaming services that you're currently enjoying, whether you're looking at them on your phone or you're watching on your big screen television. We're talking about those services that people love and some services that people hate. We're talking about things like Netflix and Hulu. Occasionally we talk about things like these things that might be coming out, like the Peacock, whenever that shows up. So it's anything interesting that we think that you would also find interesting in the world of the streaming wars. So since I went first last time, why don't you go first this time, Eric? Tell me what's up first here for the streaming wars.
Okay, let me get the article here. Let's see. Sorry about that. Just a little technical glitch. I just need to bring up the article that I want to talk about. So, you know, it's interesting. We have a pretty common theme on this show in our coverage about the streaming wars. Dave talks about it all the time, and it's kind of nice to see another outlet picking up on the same things that we're picking up on, because, you know, it gives me a certain sense of validation that, you know, we're on the right track. You know, Dave and I know what we're talking about. We have a good sense of these industries and what's going on. So this is actually a venue that I'm not very familiar with. It's called warc.com, WARC.com. And the headline reads, Disney's Hamilton success indicates how the streaming wars are ultimately about content. And who have you heard that from before? You hear it from Dave all the time. You hear it from me all the time. Content is indeed king. The article says, figures from Disney Plus show how the content business does indeed continue to be about content as the postmortem continues on the ailing Quibi. And by the way, we talked about that last week, about the problems with Quibi. It says Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton delivered, apparently. Over the last weekend, according to figures from the analytics company Aptopia, the same weekend the film version of the hit Broadway musical went live on Disney's streaming service, downloads of the app were 74% higher than average of the last 4 weekends of June 2020. So that's a sizable jump. So in other words, when Hamilton came out, Aptopia says that Disney's streaming service, Disney Plus, was downloaded 74% more than it was in the previous weeks in June. Said in the US alone, 458,796 mobile devices downloaded the app. So basically, about 500,000 people downloaded Disney Plus because of Hamilton. And you can see a correlation there. What's more, this wasn't bringing in free trial users that had stopped in mid-June. So they're saying this is not about free trials. The premiere of Hamilton on Disney Plus was a bet from the newly digital industry titan to bring in paying customers. While it's unknown how many of them will continue to pay the $6.99 a month the service costs, the fact that many customers might have subscribed through other devices suggests the true magnitude of the Hamilton bump. So, and again, and they also do talk about some of the problems with Quibi. We did talk about that last week, about the issues with Quibi right now. Quibi, of course, their entire strategy is a little different. They're really just competing for the mobile space, which is highly dominated by YouTube. But I just thought that this was really interesting, Dave, because you and I talk about this all the time, that content is king. And it seems like the gamble has paid off for Disney Plus with Hamilton.
Well, to kind of spoof Admiral Akbar from Return of the Jedi, we can't repel a content debut of that magnitude. So,
I love it.
No, yeah. I'm not surprised. The irony of this is that I needed to cut some corners because my hosting bill is a little bit more than I was expecting. So I actually just recently canceled Disney Plus. So in the midst of everyone else like signing up because of Hamilton, I'm going the opposite direction, going, I got bills to pay. So yeah, I haven't seen it. But I know a lot of people liked it because I saw a lot of people on Facebook amongst my friends talking about it. They were excited to see it. Some people saying, it lived up to the hype because they'd heard about it. I know a lot of people have been hearing about it, and a lot of people quite enjoyed it and found it interesting. I feel kind of bad, but until I get to a certain point, I'm having to start making some hard choices. And unfortunately, when I looked at Disney Plus, there's a lot of fun stuff on there, but there was just like certain things I wish, for me, it's like the Marvel shows. It's like, I know because of what's going on that we've got a delay happening here. But it seems like all those productions are so extremely delayed, including the animated What If. I mean, I would have thought that, some of this content would have hit by now, but
yeah,
who knows? I don't know. So I'm not surprised because, as you've said, Eric, we've said constantly, content is king. Content is king. A lot of these services, when they come out and they roll out, and you're like, well, they've got nothing. I'm not surprised they're struggling. I'm curious how well HBO Max is doing, just because they rolled out with one Anna Kendrick show.
Right.
That's pretty much what that and eventually there'll be the Snyder Cut. It's like, well, when the Snyder Cut's there, you have my money because I want to see it. But the Anna Kendrick show is as much. I mean, I think she's a talented actress, and I enjoyed the Pitch Perfect movies, but I'm good to wait. So content is very, very important in my opinion.
Right. And then we talked about last week how in terms of Quibi, it seems like their content really just is not getting on the radar. I haven't watched Hamilton. I have Disney Plus still, and I still haven't watched Hamilton. I was actually hoping to maybe watch it with one of my daughters or something like that, because especially my oldest daughter was really interested in it. And she listens to the songs and things on YouTube, but she hasn't seen the musical, up until now. So I know that there's that demographic that's really into this, especially with young people that are really, really into this stuff. May not be my cup of tea, although I like musicals. It wasn't something that was like, oh, I'm going to get, I've got Disney Plus because of this. I got Disney Plus because of Mandalorian. But clearly, despite what my tastes are or whatever, this is something that is a cultural phenomenon. And it has been, I think, something that has paid off, right now in the short term for Disney Plus in terms of getting new viewers and new subscribers and things like that. Whereas I don't hear anything about Quibi. And this article talks about that too. The only thing I heard about, I've talked about it a couple times, is the Reno 911. They did a reboot of well, I think a continuation, actually. I think it's the same people, but they're doing more Reno 911. Other than that, I've heard about stuff they did, and I'm just like, whatever. And I never hear anybody talking about it. I've heard tons of people talk about Hamilton. I've heard tons of people talk about Disney Plus, but I barely ever hear anything about Quibi or any of their content.
Well, along those lines, I think that my actually streaming wars story actually kind of dovetails into this too, because we're talking about content being king. So if you see the story I pulled up here, this is off of trekmovie.com. This story actually, this actually came out. Let's see, let me get my cursor over here. Wow, there's a delay between the two screens. So this was actually posted by the trekmovie.com staff, so there's no particular individual attributed. And this actually came out yesterday. But as the headline reads, and this is the big thing, talk about content is king, because I have a segue here. It says, Pluto TV adding Star Trek channel. Free streaming of Star Trek The Next Generation begins next week on Pluto TV. Pluto TV is one of those services we've been pushing pretty heavy here on the Retro Rogues live show, because it's got a lot of really great content, and they're about to get some even more great content with Pluto TV. So they're adding a Star Trek channel. So we're going to dig into this just a little bit. It says, Viacom CBS continues to take advantage of the opportunities created from its recent remerger, this time by adding a number of CBS shows to the Pluto TV free streaming service. Today, Viacom CBS announced 40 CBS-produced shows will be added to Pluto TV, the popular ad-supported streaming service Viacom purchased in 2019. And that was interesting because, Eric, you were the one that brought up the fact that Viacom owned Pluto TV, because we've been talking about Pluto TV, but I had no idea that they actually owned it until you brought it up. So it says, one of those shows will be Star Trek The Next Generation. A spokesperson for Pluto TV tells Trek Movie that TNG is the first series for a new Star Trek channel being added to the live streaming service, with more Star Trek series being added later. Along with this, it also says, in addition to Star Trek The Next Generation, starting on July 14th and continuing through the summer, the new slate of CBS programming on Pluto TV in the USA also includes Survivor, CSI Miami, The Amazing Race, Beverly Hills 90210, Everybody Hates Chris, Jack, McWiver, Scorpion, and Numbers. Pluto TV will also begin streaming select episodes from the first 10 seasons of South Park. Now, you can obviously head over to trekmovie.com and read the rest of this story. But I thought this was really relevant because guess what, CBS All Access? I was looking to cut funds, and you're also gone. And the reason you were gone is twofold. The first one is I can now watch Next Gen over here on Pluto TV. And then the second one is, in all honesty, I have been having a lot of problems lately with CBS All Access on my Samsung television. My wife and I had been enjoying, and we're making our way through the good fight, and we started having all kinds of issues with it not wanting to work. And then it began to proliferate into other things. Now, Netflix still works fine. Hulu still works fine. Like everything else seems to be working just fine. But CBS All Access was absolutely giving me fits. So when I saw this announcement, I was like, well, wait, we're getting a Star Trek channel on Pluto TV. Well, I already can watch a lot of it on Netflix. Now it's on Pluto TV. A lot of the Star Trek stuff is actually on Amazon Prime too. I was like, well, why am I continuing to pay for CBS All Access? So CBS All Access got the axe. Now, when Lower Decks comes on, Eric and I've talked about reviewing Lower Decks, so I'll resubscribe at that time so we can talk about Lower Decks. But as it currently sits, content is king, and I can watch Next Gen now in 3 different places, and they're getting a full Star Trek channel over here. So until Lower Decks or Strange New World starts, I think I'm just going to sit out CBS All Access. And I have attempted to report the problems I've had actually with CBS All Access to them so that they'll actually maybe take a look at the Samsung TV support and see if there's something they can do about it. But that email goes nowhere, and no one seems to be paying any attention to what's happening. So there you go.
This is an interesting story, and I was not aware of this. And this is I'll say this, as far as Viacom CBS, I applaud this decision. This is awesome. It's great to give this kind of content for free. So I truly applaud this decision. I didn't know this was happening, but it's got the wheels turning in my head about the bigger implications of this. And probably next week, I imagine we're going to be talking at least a little bit more about Peacock, because I believe Peacock starts its actual free service next week. So that might be something where we are able to actually get our hands on it and see exactly what's on the free service of Peacock and what's available, because they are going to have 3 tiers. So there's like I think an ad-based free service for Peacock. Right now there's already I believe ad-based but much more content service that's free for Comcast customers, people that have their cell phones through Comcast. And then there's going to be another tier of the premium content without ads. So they're going to have 3 tiers as of next week. And so it's interesting to me because there's been these rumors, and we've talked about a little bit about this idea of Viacom CBS sort of rebranding CBS All Access, which I have a lot of problems with CBS All Access too. And I mean that from a technical perspective, like Dave was talking about. I primarily watch my content on my PlayStation 4, and I was having all sorts of problems with CBS All Access on my PlayStation 4, where I get little hiccups and things like that. I've had those kind of problems on Disney Plus as well, to be honest. So I know a lot of the different companies don't seem to update their PlayStation 4 app all that well, and they seem to have problems all the time. Pluto is something that I haven't had a whole lot of problems with using on PlayStation 4. I don't use Pluto a whole lot, but I do go on Pluto from time to time. We actually reviewed Popeye, which was on Pluto, and that's why we decided to review it, because it was available there. But just, looking at my crystal ball, I can't help but wonder if the Peacock's model works and does a good job. This idea of having a free version and then a pay version. I'm wondering if the Viacom CBS All Access, which that's all I can call it right now, when it comes around, because there's all sorts of talk about that, if it's going to do something exactly like Peacock. In particular, if Peacock is successful, if the model works and it gets a lot of attention and a lot of people are watching it. I kind of wonder if Pluto TV and CBS All Access might be merged together and actually become the Viacom CBS app. What do you think about that, Dave?
I could totally see that happening. I mean, just, there's the long and the short of it, I could just totally see that happening. It would, in a way, it would make a lot of sense. So, and if you notice the way that they're migrating content over to Pluto TV, and this is not just like, Legend Lone Ranger that some people might, curiously want to watch. This is Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Right.
This is one of their most valuable, I would imagine, at least in terms of Star Trek. This is one of their most valuable properties that they have. Putting Next Gen on Pluto TV is a big deal. That's like putting original series. That's a big deal. So the fact that they're doing that with Next Gen, that says a lot. So, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do what you're saying, Eric. I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple weeks from now, that's what we're looking at. It would make sense.
And I do have to say, I want to contrast this decision about what's going on with AT&T, because we've talked about that, because I still don't understand it. I recently got access to HBO. I always confuse it. There's so many different HBOs. HBO Max. I finally got access to HBO Max because I have AT&T. And AT&T now offers HBO Max for free to AT&T cell phone subscribers like myself. I just think it's just funny how you have this situation where AT&T is competing with itself, where the DC division and the HBO division can't seem to get on the same page, and essentially HBO Max is having to borrow content from DC Universe to put on their DC section of HBO Max. It's just asinine to me. It's asinine. Contrast that to what CBS is doing. I should say Viacom CBS is doing, where Star Trek is pretty much everywhere, and they're not like taking away platforms, they're adding platforms and saying, hey, we know there are tons of people that love classic Trek. And I associate Next Gen also as classic Trek. It's just, there's tons of people. So they have it all over the place. As you mentioned it, there's stuff that you can find on Amazon Prime. There's stuff you can obviously find on CBS All Access. Now they're having stuff on Pluto. I usually watch Star Trek on the air digital subchannel called Heroes and Icons. They do six nights a week. They do hours and hours of Star Trek, starting with the original series all the way to Enterprise. And so Star Trek is like, they put it everywhere because they know people are going to watch it, wherever they can. And it just seems really, it just seems like a much better approach than what AT&T is doing right now, where basically you have this weird thing that's going on with DC Universe and, HBO Max, where they can't seem to get on the right page. And essentially what HBO Max has to do is shuffle through the content because they can't just have all the DC stuff. I'm just like, I would much more interested in the DC stuff than anything else on HBO Max. I'm a DC guy. And I just think it's a weird business decision. So I think what Viacom CBS is doing is much better, because it seems like they really are getting on the same page with the Paramount content, CBS content, all that kind of stuff, as opposed to what AT&T and Time Warner are doing.
Yeah, it just, well, we've talked about it on the show. Like, I'm a big believer in the idea of the ad-supported content. I mean, it's basically what's helped keep broadcast television going, for the longest time. So it only makes sense to me that we would find a way to integrate it a little bit more. I think this is just the first of a lot of these moves. I think you're right on the money, Eric, with a lot of this. I think a lot of this is just going to come to pass. It's just a question of timing, in my opinion. Yeah,
I think so too. Interesting, man, because I didn't know about this, so that's pretty cool.
Well, I like I said, I was looking for some Streaming Wars stories and ran across this one. I was primarily just looking at just stuff for Pluto, because I kind of like Pluto TV, and I was like, wow, this is huge, and I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it. And for a lot of our audience here at the Retro Rogues Live, we've got a lot of Star Trek fans, and I thought they would find it interesting that pretty soon here on Pluto TV you're going to be able to go get your Star Trek fix. So if you are not happy with what's been happening on CBS All Access, well, here's a place where you might be able to go and get your Star Trek fix and not have to worry about that if you don't want to support it. So there you go.
That's pretty. What I really wonder too is if we're ever going to see some of the the new Trek. I call it new Trek with the NU, as far as like Discovery or Picard, Lower Decks, potentially the short treks. It would be interesting to see if any of that stuff ever shows up on Pluto.
Well, I think we will, just because hidden behind this ad right here is here's an ad for Discovery. Now they want you to go check out CBS All Access, but there's 1 week free trial. But no, in all honesty, I think eventually a lot of the new Trek is going to wind up on some of these services, because they need to build that audience, and they need to keep those people, for lack of a better term, engaged. You know what I mean? And what's happening with Trek. So, these fans need a way to access it, and as long as the, ad money is there to support what you're doing, I think we'll see. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised that if by the time Strange New Worlds rolls out, if Strange New Worlds isn't available to watch with ads on whatever this, new, service that you're proposing, you know what I mean, might eventually be called. I wouldn't be surprised. Just like when, they launched, was it UPN, and they had Voyager be the flagship show, for UPN. I wouldn't be surprised if Strange New Worlds doesn't turn out to be, the flagship content that they're going to want you to, because that's the thing. I think Discovery and some of these other shows could have found a bigger audience if they just weren't immediately behind a paywall.
Right.
And I think with Strange New Worlds, I mean, you've got already a fan favorite captain. You've got a fan favorite number one, and you've got the Enterprise. And I could totally see where they could go, hey, this would be a great way. Let's use Strange New Worlds to launch our new app that has all this great content on it and get people over there. Because Strange New Worlds would be a draw that it would do that. So, but we'll see. We'll see. Like I said, I think a lot of this that you're proposing is going to come to pass. It's just a question of timing.
Yeah, we'll see what happens, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with Peacock, how that model received, that mixed model, I'm calling it. So, for sure.
We'll see. I think a lot of these, it's just kind of weird because like I feel like a lot of this stuff could be finding a larger audience than what it's finding. And then for example, we talked about Cobra Kai. That's going to be huge on Netflix because a lot of people that would love Cobra Kai, they haven't even had a chance to see it because it was on YouTube, their YouTube Red or whatever they called it. And it gets even weirder because I know of some people who'd heard of Cobra Kai and wanted to watch it, but they didn't even know how to watch it. They didn't even know it was on YouTube. So once Cobra Kai actually makes the migration and is on Netflix, I think Cobra Kai is going to find a huge audience that might propel it, beyond, this third season that they're going to be doing on Netflix, which is interesting because I was talking about Chilling Adventures of Sabrina and I read a story. I didn't want to cover it because of time, but apparently Sabrina is ending as of the third season, which I feel like is a little short-sighted. I think a lot of these shows, if they were given the opportunity to breathe and find an audience, with an ad support, for a base, to help pay for the content. I think a lot of this stuff could move further than what we're seeing. I feel like a lot of shows sometimes they're kind of put out to pasture prematurely, just a little bit too quickly. So,
yeah, that definitely happens.
Very cool. So do you have anything else for Streaming Wars?
Nope, that's all I got.
All right, very cool. All right. So I guess we're good to segue over. Let me get the graphic up here real quick. So if you wouldn't mind sharing my screen, we'll go ahead and get into our Rogues Retrospective. Okay, so in this episode, for the Rogue Retrospective, we're going to be talking about from 1993. We're going to be talking about Batman, Mask of the Phantasm. Now, this is a movie that we have, that I have covered with the Janimal, actually, as a part of the Retrospective show. But those of you who may have seen that know that I love this movie enough that I don't mind talking it to death because it's such a fantastic film. I have said it before and I'll say it again. I know it's a bit controversial. This is still my favorite Batman movie of all the ones that they've made, including the live action ones. I love the first Keaton one. It has a very special place in my heart. And I love the 66, the first one with Adam West, like all the, the Christian Bale, like all those movies are fun and great. And I love all of them. But this, to me, is still, for my money anyway, and in my opinion, this is still the best Batman film that we have gotten. So I'm going to read the synopsis here on IMDb real quickly, and then we're going to start off by doing, of course, to do a retrospective, you have to start off by talking about how you first saw or heard about the film. Then we're going to talk about our initial impressions back in the day. Then we'll talk about how we feel about the film having recently rewatched it. So off of IMDb, and all of the summaries for this movie suck, by the way, but we're just going to do the one that's on IMDb because at least it's short. This is Batman is wrongly implicated in a series of murders of mob bosses actually done by a new vigilante assassin. So this film, of course, on the cast stars Kevin Conroy as Batman, Dana Delaney, Hart Bachner, Stacy Keach, Abe Vigoda, Dick Miller, John Ryan. I could keep going. Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., Bob Hastings, and of course Mark Hamill as the Joker. Just a fantastic, fantastic cast, just top to bottom on the voice talent side. The directors for this include Eric Radomski, Bruce Timm, and let's see here. I didn't realize I had so many directing credits. I think because a lot of these actually did storyboards for it. But Eric Radomski, Bruce Timm, Kevin Altieri, Boyd Kirkland, Frank Parr, and Dan Reba. And it does say sequence directors, so I think that's because they actually boarded a lot of the sequences in the animated film. The writers, they're giving a credit here to Bob Kane, and Chris, we're also going to nod to the word of Mr. Bill Finger, even though they do not. Alan Burnett is credited with the story and the screenplay. Paul Dini is also co-created on the screenplay, as well as Marty Pasco, who recently passed away, who we covered here on the show, and someone who I actually was talking to Eric about, Eric, last episode, Michael Reeves, actually is also credited with the screenplay. Mike Reeves is one of my favorite animation writers. So how did I first hear about this? Well, my friends are really excited about it. I've seen a lot of coverage in Comic Scene magazine, and there was just a lot of excitement surrounding this film. I did actually go and see this in the movie theaters with some of my friends from high school, and we all quite loved the film. I remember at the time really, really thoroughly enjoying it. And this film is very unique because it gives us a unique look into Batman's sort of early years, which is interesting, and kind of gives us some really important and monumental turning points in his story, at least as far as the Batman animated universe. If you want to use the multiverse idea, the Batman animated universe exists. I highly, highly recommend this film. We'll get into spoilers here probably in a bit, but I can't recommend this film enough. If you have not seen Batman Mask of the Phantasm, I do not know why you have not seen it. It is available on Netflix. You should go get to Netflix and you should watch it as soon as we're done talking about it, because you need to finish hearing us talking about it and then you go watch it. So there you go. Now that's my initial impression of how I first heard about the film. So tell me, Eric, how did you first hear about Batman Mask of the Phantasm?
It's hard to remember because I know when it first came out, I didn't know about it. I was familiar with Batman the Animated Series, but I didn't watch it a whole lot when it was first run. I was in high school when Batman the Animated Series first came out, and so I was doing a lot of other things at that time. I was very involved in my high school. I wrestled in high school, and I was involved with a lot of different activities and things like that. So I had gone beyond, I think, cartoons, and maybe thought I was too cool for that stuff. I still actually did read comic books quite a bit, and I was into role playing, but I think I kind of gravitated away from a lot of this stuff, which is really ironic because I love the animated series. In fact, we talked about in our Joker reviews when we basically were going through all the different Jokers and did a sort of a tribute to the Jokers, which was actually inspired by the fact that Joaquin Phoenix won another Oscar for playing the Joker. I say another Oscar, not meaning him, another Oscar for the Joker, because obviously Heath Ledger was the first that actually won an Oscar for portraying the Joker. So we did a big thing about it, and I talked about how I've always felt like Batman the Animated Series is the definitive Batman for me. That's my Batman, and thus that's my Joker. Mark Hamill's version of the Joker, that's my Joker. That's who I think the Joker actually is. because there's so many different depictions. But growing up, I really wasn't that into it. I think I was aware of it. I recall having a friend that was kind of into it, so maybe I saw like an episode here and there. But this movie wasn't on my radar at all. And I think part of that is because, to be honest, the movie was a box office bomb. It did not do well in the theaters. It's actually surprising to me that you saw it in the theater, Dave, because I barely remember it being in the theaters. And I think I remember seeing a movie poster for like a week, and then it was gone. So it's kind of funny in that regard, because I do think that it's a very well regarded film now, but it didn't do very well in the theaters. And I can talk later on as we talk about viewing it today. I can say why. I think I know exactly why it didn't do very well in the theaters. But I didn't know anything about it when it really first came out. I had some vague knowledge of the series. I'd watched maybe a few episodes. I maybe saw the movie poster, as I mentioned, at the movie theater for a week, and then it was gone. So it kind of just went on the shelf of my brain, and I kind of forgot about it. Well, fast forward just a couple years, when I was like in my very early 20s, maybe even late teens, I got a roommate who was an artist and a big comic book fan. In fact, he was the first person I collaborated with and actually did an independent comic book with, and he loved all this stuff. And he had tons of the videos. I think back then it was still, a lot of it was VHS. I think we're just barely starting to transition into DVD at that time. And I believe he was the one who had a copy of this movie. And, he had talked to me about it and said, hey, you've got to see this, especially if you like the animated series, which by that time I had seen most of the episodes of the animated series, but I still hadn't seen the movie. And so I finally got to watch the movie, basically at home. And I just, I like you mentioned, I just thought it was awesome. I mean, I just kind of fell in love with it and just thought that this is a very, just really cool version of Batman. Obviously coincides with the Batman animated series very well. Is within that continuity, and was just kind of blown away. And I kind of regret the fact that I never got to see it in the theater.
Well, I actually saw it opening night, no less. We were very, very excited to see this. Now, the friends from high school I went with were diehard Batman fans, and we would just see anything Batman, and we were all very excited to go see this. Now, among the standouts of this film in particular is the score and the music. Of course, it uses the Danny Elfman Batman theme, but a lot of the other Walker music is actually by Shirley Walker. Shirley Walker actually was the composer and orchestrator who actually worked a lot with Danny Elfman. And the music in this is a really great standout. And I love the opening sequence of this film too. But I should probably talk about how I feel about the film today before I get too much further into that. So that's what we want to do, is we want to talk about how we feel about the film today. Well, I'm going to tell you that this film holds up, in my opinion. It holds up incredibly well. It has so many really great sequences in it that are, and so many great character portrayals, and it's so much fun. Of course, I talked about, we mentioned earlier going down the cast that Mark Hamill is in this movie, so the Joker is in this movie. This character of the Phantasm is actually a really interesting reinvention of another character, in my opinion anyway, a Batman villain called the Reaper. And when you look at the connections Phantasm has to Batman, the Reaper is a completely different character, but you can kind of see the illusions about how those characters are kind of similar. Even though the creators behind the story and stuff say that they weren't really looking at the Reaper per se, this character is reminiscent of the Reaper. No, this is just an incredibly well put together film. Like I said, it's my favorite. This is still, to this day, this is still my favorite Batman film. And it's interesting because I walked out of the movie theater, I really, really loved it. But I would have still said the '89 movie was my favorite Batman movie. But over time, as I've sort of grown, and my appreciation of all the different aspects of Batman, for example, my appreciation of this film has only increased. It's interesting because my appreciation of other Batman films sometimes has decreased. but not this film. It's actually increased. Um, I love all the early allusions to Bruce Wayne becoming Batman. There's so many really great lines, like just witty lines. One of my favorites that I actually use in real life still to this day is there's a scene where Andrea Beaumont, who's a character who eventually her and Bruce date. There's a great scene where he's doing martial arts and she's like, "What's that?" And he says, "Jiu-jitsu." And she says, "Gesundheit." I still use that line to this day. Whenever someone says something that's martial arts, I say Gesundheit. Um, and talk about a powerful scene. Let's talk about a powerful scene. I'm going to get into spoilers here for just a minute. Again, I can't recommend this film enough. So if you don't want spoilers, let me just tell you one more time. I can't recommend Mask of the Phantasm enough. It's on Netflix. Eric, tell me, would you recommend this film before I start going all spoiler crazy?
Oh, I thought you were going to reveal the spoiler. But anyway, well, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I really enjoy watching this film. I watched yesterday on Netflix, and it really does stand up. It's a really interesting story. It's a great Batman story, but it's just a good story overall. It's compelling. It's interesting. You learn a lot about Batman, and you learn a lot about the Joker, which I think is really cool. I think it's awesome that they basically kind of committed to a Joker origin in this. That's very significant for those of you that are hardcore Batman fans, hardcore Joker fans. They definitely commit to a vision of the Joker and who the Joker was, in terms of this movie, which I really like. I like that kind of stuff. I like origin stories. Origin stories are really cool. And I liked how they did the origin of Batman as well. I thought they did a really good job with that. So this is really, important for people that are really into the character of Batman, in terms of giving you this interpretation of how both of the characters, these major characters, the Joker and Batman, came to be. But I did want to mention, because I talked about it a little bit earlier, I do understand why this movie was kind of a failure when it came out. And I think it's because, in terms of especially the sensibilities back then, in the early 90s, regarding children, and obviously this film was marketed towards children. You really didn't market animated films to adults at that time. There were, some, exceptions here and there, but it just really wasn't done. Especially with a film, with a feature length film, you did not market these movies to adults. They're marketed to kids. And I do think this movie is pretty intense for kids. I actually kind of wish I had one of my daughters actually watch the film with me, just to kind of get their reaction, so I could tell you on the air what they thought of it, because they are young. And I don't know, it's pretty intense. That there are things. I haven't watched this movie in a while. It's been years since I've actually watched this. I don't own it. I thought I did, which is also unusual. I totally thought I had this, and when I looked at my shelf, it's not there. I was like, well, I totally thought I owned this, but I don't. So it's been a while since I watched this, and there were scenes that shocked me, where I was kind of like, holy cow, they went there. They really went there. They really did that. The Joker really did that in a kid movie. So I just kind of want to put that caveat out there, especially for people that have young children. I don't know if you might want to watch this movie first, especially if you're a Batman fan. Go ahead and watch it first, and then decide whether you want to show it to the kids or not, because it is very intense. It's an intense movie. And by the way, Dave, I think that's why, in a lot of ways, as you get older, it kind of grows on you more. It kind of has the opposite effect that a lot of other animated films have, especially ones marketed to children, where, a lot of movies you'll look back on as an adult and it'll be kind of like, oh, that was kind of cheesy. I've definitely outgrown that. I don't think you'll outgrow this one. I definitely don't think you'll outgrow this one.
No, I don't think you will. And if you'll put the spoiler banner back up, I'll get into my spoiler. So one of the most powerful, for me anyway, moments in this film is in the course of the film, Bruce Wayne meets Andrea Beaumont, and he's not Batman yet. And the whole time he keeps talking about what he calls the plan. course, the plan is for him to somehow fight crime and, in a way, avenge his parents' deaths, right? There's a really, really powerful scene in this movie where Bruce, having gone out and been dating Andrea, he goes to his parents' gravesite, and it's raining, and there's lightning cracking in the background, and he drops to his knees, and he's basically pleading to his parents, at their monument, their marker, their grave. He's basically pleading with them that, he needs it to be different, and that he never expected to be happy. It's such a powerful moment. And that's what this film has in it. It has moments like that we haven't seen in any live action Batman film, really, even to this day. We haven't had those kind of really powerful moments. As much as I love Batman Begins, we don't really get that kind of a scene. And it's so moving because you feel for Batman, and you realize you feel for Bruce, and you realize that his life could have been completely different. And then by the time that you get to the moment where he actually puts the outfit on for the first time, and then Alfred has that reaction, which is really great. It's like, oh my God, it's such a great moment, and it's so well earned. That's the thing that's really cool too. It's just this is just such an incredible Batman film. I can't recommend it enough. And it's interesting too how it's an origin story, but it also has a story that's taking place in the current time. We got multiple villains. Like, this movie does a whole bunch of stuff that everybody will tell you a movie can't do. This movie totally does it and pulls it off incredibly well. But I do still find it a little bit of a shock. And I think it's just because it's animated that this film hasn't caught on with more people. I really think it's because it's animated. People go, oh, it's a kid's cartoon, and it for whatever reason, people haven't really given this quite the shot that I think this film, in my personal opinion, deserves. So tell me, Eric, were there any particular moments from this film that you were kind of struck by? I know you mentioned there was some things with the Joker, but tell me, is there like one or two moments that when you think back, having just recently seen the film, you go, wow, that's really cool, or I can't believe they did that? Now that we're in spoilers, tell me what one or two of those moments were.
Well, first of all, I always think of the moment you described. That's what defines the movie to me. In fact, I think that's why I forgot a lot of the other details of the movie, was because that scene is so intense to me, and epitomizes who Batman is. The fact that Batman is a person that is haunted by the death of his parents, and that's what motivates him. That's the core of what he's doing, why he's doing what he's doing. And it's also, part of his disposition and why he's kind of a grumpy guy and things like that, because, he is burdened by this trauma that he experienced as a child, and it just defines him. And that moment where he's pleading with his dead parents, like, hey, can't I just be happy and fall in love and marry this girl and just be like a normal guy? Well, no, you can't, Batman, because that wouldn't be Batman. That's not what Batman is. But it's nice to see him have that conflict, because we know it's there, but you don't really get to go there, as you mentioned, in any of the other versions of Batman. You just don't really have that scene where you can really see him struggling with that decision, and also that he had the possibility of it going a different way and just being another normal, millionaire guy that just, has a wife and kids and is just, just like every other billionaire, I guess, So it's kind of interesting to see that, and it's intense. It's an intense scene, and I always remember it. I always remember that scene of him pleading basically with his dead parents, like, hey, I hope I'm not disappointing you because I want to be happy. That's really intense. That really just says what Batman is. But one of the scenes I was talking about, as far as why I understand why this film was a bomb. And actually, I do understand why this, in my mind anyway, I understand why this film has problems connecting with people. It's because of the confused marketing and because of the confused, like, who is this movie made for? Is it made for guys like, Dave and I, or is it made for my kids? Or is it made for like teenagers or what? That's the problem, I think. And I think one of the scenes that epitomizes that is when they kill the mafia guy that has the oxygen, who are actually friends with the Joker. It turns out that they were friends when the Joker was just basically a hitman. He was basically a hitman for the mob. We find that out in this movie. This version of the Joker was indeed a hitman for the mob, and then later became the Joker. And so it's amazing. So these guys are like old friends. The guy even goes to the Joker for help because he thinks Batman is killing everybody, and the Joker is the one guy who can take on the Bat. He's the one guy who can take on the Joker. He's the greatest villain in the Batman Rogues Gallery. And I always argue that the reason that the Joker has not killed Batman is not because he's incapable. It's because he kind of loves the Batman in his crazy own way, and he would just never kill him. That's my argument that I always make, that the Joker probably could kill Batman, but he just would never do it. Just like Batman would never kill the Joker. That's how they parallel each other. That's just my take on it. But anyway, he kills the guy. And the way he kills the guy, he obviously did the laughing gas thing on him, and we see the image of him with his face in the twisted, the twisted Joker smile from the Joker laughing gas, and he tied a bomb to him to blow up the Phantasm character. It's really crazy. I did not remember that scene, and when I saw it, just yesterday, I was like, "Holy crap!" You know what I mean? I had that kind of moment where I was all like, "They really put this in a kids' movie? That's pretty intense. That would be intense in any movie." And it was just like, they really went there. They really did that. So that would be my kind of shocking moment. And then again, I would say that's why I kind of get why this film doesn't always sort of resonate well, because it's hard to fit it in the context of how we do films today in terms of marketing.
Yeah, that's for sure, because it's an origin story. But at the same point, it's a contemporary bit of a mystery. I mean, I know some people solve the mystery before you really get too far into it. I mean, the clues are kind of all there. But along those same lines, like I said, this film does a lot of things that they say you can't do with a superhero film. You've got multiple villains. You have you're doing flashbacks. You're doing an origin story. A lot of people say the origin story is played out and no one cares for the origin story. But this film does all those things, and it does them incredibly well. And it has such an intensity to it, especially with the Joker. You were talking about the scene with Salvatore Balestra is one of the mobsters, and he needs help from the Joker, and he goes to him. Of course, the Joker's hiding out in what's the remnants of like the World's Fair, which is a fun sequence. But he grabs a hold of the Joker and he's pleading with him. He's like, "You know what I'm talking about. Your hands are just as dirty as mine. They're dirtier." And then the Joker is super mega intense, and you just think he's going to kill him. And he's like, "Get your hands off me, old man. I don't know where they've been." And it's Mark Hamill's performance is so incredibly well done. And then there's these really amazing moments too with Mark Hamill's Joker, where he thinks he's kind of escaped the second bad guy, and the character appears and he's like, "Uh-oh." And it's so funny. But then right after that, he's laughing maniacally. Everything is exploding and on fire. The second villain's expression is just one of total cold vengeance. Batman is trying to react to what's going on and get everything under control. And literally the world is on fire around them. And it is so amazingly well staged. It plays, and then the Joker's laughing maniacally, and it's funny, but at the same point too, you realize it's like, wow, how are they getting out of this? It's just, that's the thing. It's just this film is so well structured and it's so well put together, and it goes so many different places. It does so many different kinds. I mean, it's just, I can't recommend this film enough. I really can't. No matter how many, I mean, I watch this film like 2 or 3 times a year at least. I constantly have it on. And I was going to talk to the opening sequence. I love the opening sequence of this film, and it's a CGI model of the Batman animated, version of Gotham City. It's very Art Deco, and you're just kind of flying over the city as if you would be in the Bat plane or whatever. I mean, I imagine now for most people they think of it as sort of like a drone, flying over the city. But we have the Batman theme, but they've actually given it words.
Right.
And yeah, the words are just, I think they're just in Latin or something. And I forget, I don't think the words actually mean anything in particular. But it's just so incredibly awesome and just terribly interesting and engaging. And it's so funny because it's something they never do again in any of the Batman films. But yeah, I can't recommend this film enough. And we could talk spoilers all night. I'm obviously avoiding the obvious one, which is who is the Phantasm. I think obviously most people who've seen it know who that is. But for those of you who haven't seen it, I don't want to give that away. I want you to experience this film and come to the same conclusion, because it makes the payoff even more powerful, in my opinion. So there's my final verdict. I can't tell you to watch Mask of the Phantasm enough. It's on Netflix. If you got Netflix, it's not costing anything extra. If you haven't seen it, or you haven't seen it recently, I highly recommend Batman, Mask of the Phantasm. And then Eric, would you concur?
Yes, I recommend it as well. I will mention that I am not a big fan of the transfer that Netflix did. I have a suspicion that they gave Netflix sort of like a inferior transfer, because the better one is like on DC Universe or HBO Max. I haven't been able to compare them, but I will say I was not a big fan of the transfer. It looked very aged, which doesn't make sense in the digital era to have have that really aged look on an animated piece. In fact, anybody who watches it, I think you'll figure out what I'm talking about. There are actually parts where the images look like they're basically part of the frame has been blacked out, like it got erased or something like that. If you watch it, you'll know what I'm talking about. That's the only thing that I would say, is that the transfer they did on Netflix is not that good. I've said this with other films before. If it is an issue with the original, like the original film stock, and they just never made a good transfer of this, which is possible, because like I said, it was sort of a box office dud. So I don't know if they've really gone back and remastered it. This film could probably use one, like a really good, clean, a high definition transfer of the film. So that's the only thing that I'll mention in a negative regard, but it has nothing to do with the actual quality of the story, and also just the aesthetic and everything like that, because I love the Batman animated aesthetic. I think it works really well. So I absolutely would recommend it.
Yeah, and I have the film in Blu-ray, but then I also have it just in regular DVD. And then back in the day, I had it on VHS. I've owned this film in every format I think you can own it in, and I have actually watched it on DC Universe, and that version is nicer. I don't know. This kind of gets back to that whole controversy with Back to the Future. It's like who gave them what version and why. So yeah, it is kind of a strange thing. Kind of the same way as how this film ends with a song by Tia Carrere. That's also a bit of a strange thing. So, yeah, there you go. But it's still interesting, though. I quite like it. So awesome. So if that's good, Eric, are we good to go to the outro?
Yeah, I'm good to go.
All right, very cool. So I want to thank you, I want to thank you for hopefully watching and listening to this episode of Retro Rogues Live. You can learn more about me. You can actually see links to a lot of the episodes, links to a lot of our social media, Eric's Twitter, all that kind of stuff. All that and so much more can be found at my website, which actually serves as the official home for the Retro Rogues, and that's at davebeatty.com. That's www.davebeaty.com. I want to thank my co-host, Mr. Eric Alexander. Eric, please tell the folks hopefully watching or listening at home where they can find you on the interwebs.
Well, I'm most active on Twitter. You can find me at BaseGod14. You can actually see that in the corner of my avatar here. It's at BASSGOD14. My Twitter DMs are always open. I'm always open to suggestions from anybody in the Rogues Gallery if they have suggestions for a show or just want to talk about something. I also do the YouTube, the official YouTube, which is also BaseGod14, and also the official Twitch, which is also BaseGod14. So you can find me on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube at BaseGod14. And then I'm actually going to go back to a comment earlier because we always like to leave the show with a comment from the Rogues Gallery because we appreciate you all so much. But you've been a little silent for the last part of the show. But I am going to go back to an older comment, and because it's good advice. It's good advice, so it's worth repeating. And Bobby Chambers said, "Never trust a ninja." And with that, we will leave our viewers with the last word.